Louisiana, where the Spanish moss hangs like funeral shrouds and the bayou breathes at night. 13 locations, 13 nightmares, from the cursed swamps of Manchac to the flooded congregations beneath Toledo Bend, from the grinding machinery that hungers for living flesh to the Mardi Gras parade that never ends. Tonight we're descending into the darkest corners of the Pelican State, where voodoo curses still hold power, where the Rougarou's bride still waits in the basin, and where Hurricane Katrina left something behind that refuses to let go. If you've ever wondered what lurks in the shadows of America's most haunted state, you're about to find out. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for Verified Souls, because once you hear these stories, Louisiana will never look the same again. Let's begin with a plantation where the mirrors don't just reflect your image, they show you how you're going to die. I booked the room at Myrtles Plantation on a Thursday afternoon when the office felt like it was crushing my skull between spreadsheets and fluorescent lights. 26 miles north of Baton Rouge, wrapped in Spanish moss and antebellum grandeur, the plantation promised a peaceful weekend away from everything. The website mentioned the history, the architecture, the gardens. It mentioned the legends too, but I'm from Louisiana. Every building older than 50 years claims to have ghosts. I requested the room with the large mirror because the photos showed how it caught the morning light, how it made the space feel bigger, more elegant. The plantation confirmed my reservation within an hour. I should have wondered why they had availability on such short notice. The drive up Highway 61 felt like moving backwards through time. Baton Rouge faded into sugarcane fields, then into corridors of live oaks that formed tunnels over the road. By the time I pulled into the plantation's driveway, the November sun was already sinking, turning everything amber and shadow. The main house stood exactly like the pictures promised. White columns, wraparound porch, crepe myrtle trees that the owner had supposedly planted after his family died. I'd read about that on the drive. Sarah Woodruff and her 2 daughters, poisoned by a slave named Krewe, who supposedly baked oleander extract into a birthday cake. The story changed depending on which website you read, but the core remained the same. 3 deaths, 1 mirror that wasn't covered according to Southern tradition. 3 souls trapped in the reflection forever. Tourist nonsense, I thought, grabbing my overnight bag from the trunk. The woman who checked me in had the practiced smile of someone who'd given the same speech 1,000 times. She handed me a brass key. They still used actual keys here, not plastic cards, and pointed toward the staircase. My room was on the 2nd floor, 3rd door on the left. She mentioned that breakfast was served at 8, that the mystery tour ran at 7 if I was interested, that the mirrors throughout the house had been part of the original 1796 construction. Her eyes lingered on me a moment too long when she said that last part. I thanked her and climbed the stairs, counting them out of habit. 17 steps. I remembered something about 17 steps from one of the legends, something about a man who was shot and died climbing them, but the details escaped me. The room was beautiful. High ceilings, antique furniture that probably cost more than my car, windows that overlooked the gardens where twilight was settling like a held breath. In the mirror, it dominated the far wall, easily 7 feet tall, framed in dark wood carved with flowers and vines. The glass had a quality to it that modern mirrors don't have. Slightly darker, slightly imperfect, like looking through water. I set my bag down and walked closer. My reflection walked toward me, but for just a second, just the briefest flicker, it seemed like my reflection was standing still while I moved. I blinked. The effect vanished. Old glass, I told myself, warped by centuries and humidity. I unpacked, changed into comfortable clothes, and decided to skip the mystery tour. I'd come here to relax, not to listen to rehearsed ghost stories for tourists. Instead, I ordered room service, shrimp étouffée that tasted like my grandmother's recipe, and settled into the antique chair with my phone. But the cell service was terrible, barely 1 bar, and the Wi-Fi password they'd given me didn't work. Fine. A real escape from technology. I hadn't brought a book, so I just sat there, eating slowly, watching the room darken as night pressed against the windows. The mirror caught the lamplight and threw it back in strange angles. I found myself looking at it more than I looked at anything else. Around 10 o'clock, I washed up and got ready for bed. The bathroom was down the hall, shared facilities like staying in an actual historical home, so I grabbed my toiletry bag and stepped out. The hallway was empty, lit by wall sconces that flickered like candles, even though they were electric. When I came back 10 minutes later, my door was open. Not wide open, but definitely ajar, enough that I could see the lamp still glowing inside. I was certain I'd closed it. I pushed it open slowly, half expecting someone to be inside, but the room was empty. Everything was exactly where I'd left it. Except when I looked at the mirror, my reflection was already looking back at me. Not turning to look. Already looking. Already waiting. I stood completely still, my reflection stood completely still. But there was something wrong with the timing, like watching a video with audio delay. When I raised my hand, my reflection raised its hand a fraction of a second later. When I tilted my head, the reflection caught up. I walked closer. The reflection walked closer. And then I saw what was behind me in the glass. A child's face pressed against the mirror from the inside. Hands splayed on the glass like she was trapped in a box. She was blonde, maybe 8 years old, and her mouth was moving like she was screaming, but no sound came through. I spun around. Nothing behind me. Just the empty room and the closed door. When I turned back to the mirror, the child was gone, but my reflection was smiling. I wasn't. My hands started shaking. I told myself it was the light, the stress, the exhaustion from work, anything rational. I turned off the lamp, plunging the room into darkness, except for the moonlight through the windows. In the dark, the mirror glowed faintly, like it had its own light source. I could see my silhouette in it, standing by the bed, but the silhouette had something wrong with its proportions. The arms were too long, the head tilted at an angle that would break a neck. I closed my eyes and got into bed, pulling the covers up like I was 10 years old again, like blankets could protect me from anything. Sleep didn't come. How could it? Every time I opened my eyes, the mirror was there, and every time I looked at it, something was different. Once I saw myself standing beside the bed, looking down at myself, lying in it. Once I saw myself with gray hair and sunken eyes, aged 40 years in an instant. Once I saw myself with dirt in my mouth and flowers growing from my eye sockets. Each version lasted only seconds before snapping back to normal, but normal didn't feel normal anymore. The mirror wasn't showing me reflections. It was showing me possibilities, deaths, futures, every way I could end. Around 3 a.m, I heard singing. Children's voices, sweet and high, coming from inside the mirror. I sat up in bed and the singing stopped. In the glass, I could see the room behind me, but it wasn't the room I was in. The furniture was arranged differently. The walls were a different color, and there were shapes moving in that other room, small shapes, child-sized, dancing in circles. I watched them for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Then one of them stopped dancing and turned to face the mirror, turned to face me. She walked toward the glass, and I realized she was walking through the reflection of the room, getting closer to the surface, closer to breaking through. Her hand pressed against the inside of the mirror, and this time I heard the sound. Fingernails on glass, scraping, desperate. I should have run. I should have grabbed my bag and my keys and my phone and run straight down those 17 steps and out to my car. But I couldn't move, because I finally understood what the mirror was showing me. It wasn't showing me how I would die. It was showing me that I was already dying. Every version of myself I'd seen wasn't a future. It was happening simultaneously, all at once, every possible end playing out in parallel. And the children weren't trying to escape the mirror. They were trying to pull me in, because they'd learned that the only way to leave was to have someone take your place. The child's face pressed harder against the glass. Behind her, I could see the other one now, the second daughter, both of them pushing forward. And behind them, a woman in a dress from another century, Sarah Woodruff herself, her face gray with poisoning, her eyes black holes that held centuries of waiting. The glass started to ripple like water. My reflection reached toward me from the other side. I felt the air in the room grow cold, felt something brush against my arm, even though I was alone. The mirror's surface bowed outward, stretching, nearly breaking. My reflection's hand passed through the glass, solid and real, reaching for mine. I don't remember making the decision. I just remember my feet hitting the floor, my hands grabbing my bag, my body hitting the door hard enough to bruise my shoulder. The hallway was darker than before, those flickering sconces casting shadows that moved wrong. I ran for the stairs, heard footsteps behind me that weren't my own, took those 17 steps 3 at a time, crashed through the front door and out into the November night. My car was still there. My keys were somehow in my hand. I didn't look back at the windows. I didn't check to see if anyone was following. I just drove, tires spitting gravel, until the plantation disappeared behind the oak trees. I didn't stop driving until I reached the I-110 interchange, where the lights of Baton Rouge felt like salvation. In my rearview mirror, I could see my own face, normal and terrified, and alive. Just my face, nothing else. But for the rest of that drive, I couldn't shake the feeling that the reflection in my mirror wasn't quite matching my movements, that somewhere in the glass, I was still back in that room, still reaching, still being pulled in, still learning what it means to be trapped while the world moves on without you. The next morning, I got an email from the plantation, an automated message thanking me for staying, asking me to review my experience, informing me that I'd left some belongings in the room and they were being held at the front desk. But I hadn't left anything. I'd grabbed my bag. I'd taken everything, unless something of me stayed behind, unless the mirror kept what it caught. I deleted the email. I've never driven past St. Francisville again. But sometimes late at night, when I look at any mirror too long, I see myself looking back a fraction of a second too late. And I wonder which version is real, which version escaped. If this story left you checking your own mirrors, you're not alone. Subscribe to Verified Souls for more nightmares from Louisiana's darkest corners, because some reflections show more than what's standing in front of them. The engine dies at exactly 6:47 p.m., right when the sun's bleeding out over the cypress trees and the water's turning from brown to black. I've been guiding boats through Manchac swamp for 32 years, same as my daddy did before me, same as his daddy did before the hurricane took him in 1915. I know every channel, every sandbar, every gator nest from here to Lake Maurepas. I know when something's wrong with the water. And right now, something's wrong with the water. My clients are a couple from Dallas, honeymooners who wanted the authentic Louisiana experience and paid extra for the sunset tour. They're not concerned yet. The husband still got his phone out trying to get a photo of a great blue heron that took off 5 minutes ago. The wife's asking if we'll see alligators. I don't answer because I'm looking at the Spanish moss. It's hanging dead still even though there's wind coming across the lake. Not swaying, not moving. Just hanging there like it's holding its breath. That's when I know we're in the wrong part of the swamp. I pull the starter cord. Nothing. Pull it again. The engine turns over, but won't catch. The husband finally puts down his phone and asks if there's a problem. I tell him, no, just flooded the engine, give it a minute. But that's a lie. This engine's got 17,000 hours on it, and it's never flooded once. I built it myself from a 1987 Evinrude block, and it runs on swamp gas and spite. It shouldn't be dead. I pull the cord a third time, and that's when I smell it. Oleander. Strong and sweet and wrong because oleander doesn't grow in swamp water. It grows in gardens. It grows where people plant it. It grew in Julia Brown's yard before the storm took everything. The wife asks what that smell is. I tell her jasmine. Another lie. We're drifting now, current pulling us south toward the old Fernier site, where the town used to be before. The hurricane of 1915 drowned it during Julia Brown's funeral. My granddaddy was 12 years old when the water came. He watched 25 people die in the railroad depot when it collapsed. He watched the coffin that held Julia Brown float away, watched the wooden box she was sealed in break apart, watched the casket inside disappear under black water. They never found it. Some folks say she wanted it that way. Some folks say she's still down there, waiting. I'm reaching for the auxiliary paddle when the moss starts moving. Not swaying, reaching. Long strands of it extending down toward the boat, like fingers, like hair, like something looking for purchase. The husband sees it too now. He's standing up, which is exactly what you don't do in a 14-foot aluminum flatboat, and I'm about to tell him to sit down when the boat rocks. Not from his weight, from underneath. Something big just passed under us, something that displaced enough water to lift us 3 inches and drop us back down. Gators don't move like that. Gators are surgical, efficient. They don't. Rock boats. They pull things off them, but there are other things in Manchac besides gators. Things that were here before the Huma and Choctaw used these waterways. Things that stayed after the hurricane took 3 villages in one night. Things that maybe aren't animals at all. My daddy told me Julia Brown didn't curse the town. He said she tried to warn them. Said she could feel something waking up in the swamp, something that had been sleeping since before Louisiana was Louisiana. Said the hurricane wasn't weather. It was the swamp taking a breath. The wife's crying now. She wants to know why we're not moving. I tell her we're going to paddle back, that it's just a mechanical issue, that everything's fine. But the paddles are missing. They were clipped to the side of the boat when we left the dock. I checked them myself. Now the clips are empty and there's water inside the boat where there wasn't water before, just an inch or so. But it's rising, not leaking in, rising, like something's filling us from underneath. That's when I hear the singing. It's faint at first, barely audible over the husband's panicked breathing and the wife's crying. But it gets louder. A woman's voice, old and rough, singing in Creole French. The words are wrong. I grew up speaking Creole, and these words aren't quite right. Like someone singing the language backwards. But I know the melody. My granddaddy used to hum it when he was scared. He said Julia Brown sang it on her porch the week before she died. Said it went, "When I die, I take the whole town with me." Said she was right. The water in the boat is up to our ankles now. The husband's yelling something about calling for help, but there's no cell service in Manchac. There never has been. The wife's looking over the side, and I want to tell her not to. Want to tell her to keep her eyes in the boat, but I'm looking too because something's moving under the surface. Shapes. Multiple shapes. They're pale and wrong, and they're not swimming. They're walking. Walking on the bottom of the swamp in water that's 12 feet deep. Walking in formation like they're in a parade, like they're following something. One of them surfaces. Just the top of a head at first, hair floating like seaweed, and then a face. It's a woman. She's bloated and gray, and her eyes are gone, but she's smiling. She opens her mouth, and that's where the singing's coming from, pouring out of her throat, along with black water and crawfish and things that haven't been named. She's close enough that I can see the decay, can see the way her skins come apart in sheets, can see the railroad spikes still lodged in her collarbone from when the depot fell. She's been down there for 110 years. They all have. The husband tries to push away from her using his hands, and that's when they grab him. Hands coming up out of the water, dozens of them, gray and swollen and strong. They don't pull him under fast. They're savoring it. They're taking their time. The wife's screaming and reaching for him, but I grab her arm, because if she leans over, they'll take her too. The husband's still visible beneath the surface, still thrashing, and I can see more of them down there now, surrounding him, welcoming him. They're all smiling. They've been waiting a long time for company. The wife's in shock, just staring at the water where her husband was. The singing's getting louder. There are more of them surfacing now, forming a circle around the boat. Men, women, children. All of them drowned. All of them from 1915. One of them's wearing the rotted remains of a railroad uniform. Another's holding a baby that isn't moving. They're all singing Julia Brown's song, and they're not trying to come into the boat. They're just singing and smiling and waiting. The boat's sinking. The water's up to our knees. I grew up hearing stories about Manchac, about how it's cursed, about how Julia Brown sits at the bottom of the swamp in her casket that was never found, playing her guitar with fingers made of bone, singing her song for anyone who comes too far south, about how the people who died in the hurricane never left. They stayed with her. They became part of the swamp, part of whatever woke up the day she died. My granddaddy said the swamp breathes, said you can hear it if you listen close enough. I'm listening now. I can hear it. Breathing, counting. The wife stops screaming. She's just staring at the drowned people surrounding us. One of them, a girl, maybe 14 with funeral clothes still clinging to her body, reaches up and touches the side of the boat. Where she touches, the aluminum corrodes instantly, flaking apart like rust, like it's been underwater for a century. The hole spreads. Water pours in. We're going down. The wife looks at me and asks if we're going to die. I tell her the truth this time. I tell her yes. The water's up to our chests when the current changes. We're not sinking anymore. We're being pulled. Something underneath has us. Something with the strength of a hurricane. The drowned people part, making a path, and I see where we're going. There's a structure down there, visible through the black water. The railroad depot. It's still intact, still standing, somehow preserved. And in front of it, sitting in a rocking chair, on what used to be the platform, there's a woman. She's wearing a dress from 1915, and she's holding a guitar. She's not decomposed like the others. She looks alive. She looks patient. She looks like she's been waiting for us specifically. Julia Brown waves. Just a small gesture, welcoming. The drowned people are singing louder now, harmonizing with her guitar. The melody's beautiful and terrible, and I understand now what my granddaddy meant when he said the swamp breathes. It's not breathing. It's calling people down, calling them home. The wife's hand finds mine, underwater, and I squeeze it, because there's nothing else to do. We're going down to the depot. We're going to join the congregation. The last thing I see before the water closes over my head is the Spanish moss. It's moving again, swaying now, waving goodbye. The last thing I hear is Julia Brown's song, clear as crystal through the water. When I die, I take the whole town with me. She wasn't lying. She wasn't cursing. She was promising. And in Manchac swamp, promises keep. The GPS says, turn left on Dwyer Road, but Dwyer Road doesn't exist anymore. Hasn't existed since Katrina took half of New Orleans east and left the rest to rot. I'm sitting in my Honda with the engine running and 16 pizzas getting cold in the back seat and an address that leads to nothing but darkness and overgrown lots where houses used to be. The delivery app shows the pin dropping 2 miles down what looks like a service road, shell and gravel. The kind of road that doesn't have a name because nobody's supposed to be using it. But the order's already paid for, already tipped $40, and I need that money more than I need to follow my instincts. I turn onto the shell road. My headlights catch the edges of trees that have grown wild since the storm, branches reaching across like they're trying to meet in the middle. This whole area used to be neighborhoods, subdivisions with cute names like Little Woods and Pines Village. Now it's just empty land, returning to swamp, returning to what it was before people tried to tame it. The city gave up on rebuilding out here. Too expensive, too damaged, too something. So they left it, and the forest came back fast, aggressive, reclaiming. My phone loses service at exactly the 1 mile mark. The delivery app freezes with the blue dot stuck on the road and the destination pin blinking ahead. No service means no calling this in, no texting my girlfriend that I'm running late, no backup plan. Just me and the headlights and the sound of shells crunching under my tires. The customer's name on the order is just letters, GRNCH. Probably a typo. Probably somebody's drunk at 2 in the morning ordering 16 pizzas as a joke. Probably. That's when the engine sputters. Just once, just a hiccup, but enough to make my stomach drop because this Honda has 200,000 miles on it and a rebuilt transmission that cost more than the car's worth. It sputters again. The headlights dim. I press the gas and nothing happens for a full 3 seconds before the engine catches and lurches forward. Something's wrong. Something's interfering with the electrical system. Static pours through the radio even though the radio's off. The dome light flickers. Then I see them on the side of the road. 3 shapes. Standing. Not moving. Just standing there in the tree line watching my car approach. They're short. Maybe 4 feet tall, pale in my headlights. At first I think they're kids, but kids don't stand that still. Kids don't have proportions that wrong. As I get closer, I see the details, and my brain refuses to process them correctly because what I'm seeing doesn't fit with what should exist. They have skin that's pure white. Not Caucasian white, but white like things that live in caves, like things that have never seen sun. Their heads are too large, their mouths are too wide, and they're smiling. I accelerate. The Honda makes a grinding sound but moves forward, and I pass them, and in my rear view mirror, watch them turn in unison to follow my car with their heads. They don't have noses, just nostrils. And their eyes catch the red glow of my taillights and reflect it back like animals, like possums, like things that hunt at night. My hands are shaking on the wheel. My delivery bag with the pizzas shifts in the passenger seat, and I smell garlic and cheese and tomato sauce, and underneath that something else. Something like rot. Something that's been seeping into the car since I turned onto this road. The GPS destination is just ahead. A clearing where a house used to be. I can see the foundation, the concrete pad with pipe stubs sticking up where plumbing used to connect. No house, no people, no customer. Just an empty lot, and my headlights illuminating weeds and a rusted lawn chair and something else. Movement. More of them. They're coming out of the trees. 6, 7, 8 of them. Different sizes, but all with that same wrong anatomy. That same pale skin. Those same 2 large mouths. They're walking toward my car, and they're not walking like people. They're walking on their toes, crouched forward, arms hanging too long. I throw the car in reverse. The transmission screams. One of them jumps, and I don't mean jumps like a person jumping. I mean launches itself like something with different muscle structure, different bone density. It hits my hood with a sound like a hammer on metal, and I see its face pressed against my windshield. The mouth opens wider than should be anatomically possible, and there are teeth inside. Too many teeth, not human teeth. The breath that comes out fogs the glass, and in the fog I see it's been eating something recently. Something that left residue. Something red. I scream. I'm not ashamed of that. I scream and gun the engine, and the thing slides off my hood, and I'm reversing blind, just holding the gas down, feeling the tires spin in the shell, and then catch, and then I'm moving backwards, fast, too fast, and I hit something. Not one of them. A tree. The impact throws me forward, against the seatbelt, and the Honda stalls. The silence is worse than the engine noise. In the silence, I can hear them. They're making sounds, not words. Something between clicking and hissing, like cicadas, but lower, wetter. Communication. They're coordinating. I turn the key. The starter clicks. Clicks again. The engine won't turn over. The headlights are still on but dimming, the battery draining into something that isn't electrical failure. The dome light is flickering in a pattern that almost looks intentional. Morse code. A warning. A beacon. They're surrounding the car now. I can see them in the headlights, in the side mirrors, in the rear view. 10 of them. 12. They're not rushing. They're taking their time. One of them presses its hand against my window, and the hand has 6 fingers, each ending in what looks like a claw that's been filed sharp. It drags the claw down the glass, and the sound it makes bypasses my ears and goes straight into my spine. The window holds, but I can see the scratch mark, see how deep it cuts. The largest one approaches the driver's door. It has to be 5 feet tall, and its proportions are more human than the others, but more wrong because of it. It's wearing clothes, shredded clothes. Old Mardi Gras beads hang around its neck. It was human once, maybe. Or it's wearing the remnants of someone who was. It looks at me through the window, and I see intelligence in those red eyes. Recognition. Hunger. It speaks. The sound comes from its throat, but the mouth doesn't move right for the words. Pizzas. That's what it says. Pizzas. They ordered the pizzas. They lured me here. They've been doing this. The $40 tip. The fake address. The GPS coordinates that lead to nowhere. They've figured out the delivery apps. They've figured out how to hunt in the modern world. I grab my phone even though there's no service, because what else do I have? The screen's glitching, showing impossible colors, showing apps I don't have installed. The delivery app opens by itself. New order notification, same address, same customer name, GRNCH, 0 miles away. They're placing another order, right now, standing outside my car, learning. The claws pierce through the door panel, not through the window, through the metal. They're strong enough to puncture automotive steel. The door peels open like a can opener working through aluminum. Night air rushes in, carrying that rot smell amplified 100 times. The smell of the woods they live in. The smell of whatever they've been eating. The smell of goats, of blood, of the livestock that goes missing from farms at the edge of the parish, of the people who disappear, taking shortcuts through New Orleans East. Hands grab my arm. The claws sink in, and I feel them hit bone. I'm pulled out of the car, and the seatbelt catches me and then doesn't, and I'm on the ground, in the shells, and the shells are cutting through my uniform shirt, and there are faces above me, too many faces, all with those mouths opening. The largest one speaks again. Good driver. Fast. Come here fast. It sounds pleased. It sounds like it's practicing. One of them is holding the pizza bag. It opens it, and the smell of garlic fills the air, and they recoil, not from fear, from disgust. They throw the pizzas away, scattered in the dirt, and I understand. They didn't want the pizzas. They wanted the driver. They've always wanted the driver. The delivery is just the bait. I try to fight. I get one hand free and swing and connect with something that feels like hitting a bag of gravel wrapped in skin. The thing I hit doesn't flinch. It grabs my wrist and bends it backward, and I hear the crack before I feel the pain. The pain comes after, rolling up my arm in waves. I'm screaming again. They're dragging me toward the tree line, toward wherever they live, toward whatever they've built in the abandoned subdivisions of New Orleans East, where the city doesn't come anymore, where the police don't patrol, where delivery drivers are the only people stupid enough to go. My phone is still in my pocket. It's vibrating, the delivery app. New order, different driver, different victim. I try to yell, try to warn whoever's going to accept it, but one of them puts its hand over my mouth, and the hand tastes like copper and earth. The trees close overhead. The last thing I see is my Honda, with the driver's door torn open and the headlights still glowing in the distance, getting smaller. The last thing I hear is my phone vibrating. Another order, another driver. They never stopped hunting on Grunch Road. They just learned to use DoorDash. The trail camera captured her first appearance on October 3rd at 3:13 a.m. Frame 404-7 of 2008-91 from that week. I didn't notice her initially. I was reviewing footage for a research grant on black bear migration patterns through the Atchafalaya Basin, and my focus was on quadrupeds, not bipeds. It wasn't until my third pass through the data that I saw her, a woman in a white dress, luminous against the infrared sensors, walking into the frame from the east, walking toward the water, walking with purpose. I'm Dr. Sarah Chen, wildlife photographer and ecological researcher based out of Lafayette. I'd been tracking a juvenile male bear through St. Martin Parish for 6 weeks, documenting his territorial movements as he established range in the basin's northern sectors. My camera array consisted of 42 motion-activated units positioned throughout a 12-square-mile grid. Camera 17, the one that caught her, was mounted on a bald cypress 300 yards from the nearest access point, a flooded logging road that hadn't seen vehicle traffic since before Hurricane Rita. There was no reason for anyone to be there, especially not at 3:13 in the morning, especially not in formal wear. I checked the following night's footage. October 4th, 3:13 a.m., frame 289. She appeared again. Same camera, same direction, same white dress that seemed to generate its own light in the infrared spectrum. I watched her walk across the frame in that stuttering motion trail cameras produce, 1 second here, 3 seconds later there, until she reached the edge of the bayou and continued walking into the water. The camera caught her for 6 more frames as she waded deeper, the white dress floating around her like a shroud before the Spanish moss blocked the view. Professional curiosity became obsession. I pulled footage from every camera in the array. She appeared on 5 others, always at exactly 3:13 a.m., always walking the same direction, always wearing white. The timestamps formed a path. She was traveling from somewhere southeast of my grid toward camera 17 and whatever lay beyond it. I calculated her route using GPS coordinates. It terminated at a location the old topographical maps identified as the ruins of a settlement called Petit Cœur, buried under 12 feet of silt since the 1927 flood. Before the flood, parish records listed it as home to 37 people. After the flood, it was listed as home to none. On October 9th, I broke protocol. I went into the field at night. Every safety regulation I'd ever followed, every wilderness guideline I'd taught to graduate students, all abandoned because I needed to see her with my own eyes. I needed to understand what I was documenting. I positioned myself near camera 17 90 minutes before her expected appearance, armed with thermal imaging equipment, a digital camera with night vision capabilities, and a headlamp I'd promised myself I wouldn't use. The basin at night is not silent. It's full of sound, full of life, moving in darkness. But that night, it felt empty, expectant. At 3:11 a.m., the temperature dropped. Not gradually, instantly. My breath became visible. The thermal imaging equipment registered the change as a 15-degree plunge in ambient temperature within 30 seconds. Impossible unless something was actively extracting heat from the environment. At 3:12 a.m., the sound stopped. Every frog, every insect, every creature that had been singing the swamp's night song went silent. At 3:13 a.m., she appeared. She was more substantial than the trail camera footage suggested. Not translucent, not ghostly, but solid. Real. The white dress was a wedding gown, I realized, though the style was from another era. High-necked, long-sleeved, the kind of dress a Cajun bride would have worn in the 1920s. Her feet were bare. Her hair hung long and dark down her back. She moved with mechanical precision, each step identical to the last, and she was singing. The song was in Cajun French, words I half recognized from my time living in Lafayette, but the melody was wrong, inverted, like hearing something beautiful played backwards. I made the mistake of stepping into her path. Every scientific instinct I possessed demanded documentation, demanded interaction, demanded data. I raised my camera. She stopped walking. She stopped singing. She turned her head to look at me, and that's when I saw her face clearly for the first time. Beautiful, young, 20, maybe 22, and completely empty. Her eyes held nothing, no recognition, no awareness, no humanity. She was a recording, a loop, a bride walking to a wedding that happened 80 years ago. Then she smiled. That emptiness filled with something that made me understand why every culture has words for demons. She spoke, and her voice carried weight that sound shouldn't have, syllables that pressed against my chest like physical force. You see me. Finally, someone sees me. Her French was archaic, formal, but I understood it perfectly. Too perfectly, like the meaning was being inserted directly into my brain. He promised he would wait. At Petit Cœur, at our tree. He promised. I couldn't move. The camera hung useless in my hands. She walked toward me, and the closer she got, the colder the air became. The moisture in my eyes started to freeze. She reached out one hand, and her fingers were impossibly long, impossibly thin, and where her hand passed through the air, the space distorted. Will you witness? Someone must witness. The ceremony must be witnessed. I ran. I'm not proud of it. I'm a scientist. I'm trained to observe, to document, to maintain objectivity. But I ran through the basin in the dark, thermal equipment abandoned, camera forgotten, headlamp finally switched on, and cutting through the darkness in a wild beam. Behind me, she continued walking. Not running, not chasing, walking. At the same mechanical pace, but somehow keeping up. Every time I looked back, she was the same distance away, gliding through obstacles that should have stopped her, through water that should have slowed her, always exactly 20 feet behind me. I made it back to my vehicle as the sun was rising. She was still following, but as the first rays of light penetrated the canopy, she stopped, stood still, and began to fade, not disappearing, fading like she was made of morning mist and the sun was burning her away. The last thing to disappear was her smile. I reviewed the footage later, after I'd warmed up, after I'd convinced myself I hadn't imagined it. My camera had automatically recorded everything even though I wasn't actively shooting. The images were corrupted. Every frame featuring her was distorted, pixelated, wrong, but the audio was clear. Her voice asking me to witness, and underneath her voice another sound, breathing, heavy, animal breathing, something with lungs too large to be human, something that had been following her, following us. I researched Petit Cœur. It took 6 days in the parish archives, but I found the records. October 3rd, 1925. Marguerite Boudreau, age 21, married Henri Thibodeau, age 26, in a ceremony held at the settlement's Catholic Church. The marriage was documented. The ceremony was completed. But the wedding night never happened. Henri disappeared that evening. Search parties found his clothes shredded near the western bayou. They found his blood in the water. They found tracks in the mud, canine tracks, but too large, too deep. The rougarou, the old-timers said. The werewolf that hunts those who break their vows. Marguerite refused to believe Henri had abandoned her. She walked into the swamp every night at 3:13 a.m., the time their ceremony had been scheduled, wearing her wedding dress, searching for her husband. On the 7th night, she didn't return. They found her dress floating in the bayou near an abandoned trapper's cabin. Inside the cabin, they found symbols scratched into the walls, voodoo marks, binding symbols. Someone had cursed Henri to become rougarou. Someone had made Marguerite a bride with no groom. 2 years later, the flood came. Petit Cœur was swallowed. Marguerite's body was never found. Henri's body was never found, but witnesses reported seeing them. A woman in white walking through the rising water. A wolf walking beside her. Both heading toward the settlement's submerged church. Both disappearing beneath the surface. I returned to Camera 17 on October 10th. She appeared again at 3:13 a.m., but this time she wasn't alone. Something walked beside her, parallel to her path, staying just outside the frame. Something large, something that moved on 4 legs, but had a gait too upright, too human. The thermal signature registered wrong, too hot in some places, too cold in others, like whatever it was, couldn't decide if it was alive or dead. I watched through the night vision scope as Marguerite reached the bayou and continued walking into the water. This time, the creature followed her. I saw it clearly for just a moment as it entered the frame. It had a wolf's head, a man's body, hands that ended in claws, and it was wearing the rotted remains of a groom's suit. They walked into the water together. They kept walking until the water closed over their heads, and beneath the surface, in the green glow of my night vision, I saw them reach for each other, saw their hands meet, saw them continue walking down toward the submerged ruins of Petit Coeur, where a church still stands under 12 feet of silt, and a ceremony that started in 1925 has never ended. I pulled all my cameras from the grid the next morning. My bear migration study remains incomplete. My research grant was revoked when I couldn't produce results. But I have the footage. I have documentation of something that shouldn't exist. A wedding ceremony that's been running on loop for 80 years. A bride who won't stop walking. A groom who became a monster and loves her anyway. Sometimes at night, I still see them. Not in the basin. In my apartment in Lafayette. Standing at the foot of my bed. Marguerite in her white dress. Henri in his beast form. Both dripping swamp water on my floor. They don't speak. They just watch, making sure I keep my promise. Making sure I witness. Because someone has to remember. Someone has to know that in the Atchafalaya Basin, love doesn't die. It just transforms into something that hunts. Night shift at Angola starts at 11 p.m. and ends at 7 a.m., 8 hours. That feel like 80 when you're walking the tiers of death row in a prison that's been swallowing men whole since 1901. I'm 3 weeks into this job, rookie officer. The other guards call me fresh meat, which I'm trying not to take personally. They've been working these blocks for years, decades, some of them, and they have this look in their eyes like they've seen things that can't be put into reports. Tonight, Officer Landry is training me. He's 56, been here since 1992, and he doesn't talk much except to give instructions. Check the cells, count the inmates, watch the shadows. That last one isn't in the manual. Angola sits on 18,000 acres of former plantation land, surrounded on 3 sides by swamp and the Mississippi River. It's called Angola because that's what the plantation was called, named after the country where the slaves came from before they were brought here in chains to pick cotton. Now it houses over 6,000 inmates in maximum security, and over 90% of them will die here. Will be buried in the prison cemetery with markers that just say their inmate number. The history doesn't let you forget what this place was built on. The weight of it presses down on everything. Death row is in Camp F, a concrete block structure with no windows and air that doesn't move right. The humidity in Louisiana is always oppressive, but inside Angola it's worse. It's thick. It clings to your skin like something alive. Landry says you get used to it. I don't believe him. We start our rounds at 11:47 p.m., walking the tier with flashlights even though the fluorescent lights overhead are buzzing and flickering. Landry insists on the flashlights, says the overhead lights lie, says you need to see into the corners where the shadows pool. Cell 14 is empty. Has been empty since June when they executed Marcus Thibodeau for the murder of 3 people during a gas station robbery in 1998. Lethal injection. 3 drugs that stop your heart and lungs and brain in that order. Clean. Medical. Nothing like the electric chair they used before 1991. Nothing like the hanging they did before that. But Landry stops at cell 14 and shines his light inside anyway. The cell is regulation size, 6 by 9 feet. Concrete walls, metal toilet, metal bed frame with a thin mattress, and condensation. The walls are dripping with it. Water running down in rivulets even though the cell is empty, even though there's no humidity source. The air inside is fogged. Happens sometimes, Landry says, his voice flat. Humidity gets trapped. Moisture builds up. But he doesn't step inside to check. He just marks the cell as inspected on his clipboard and keeps moving. I follow because I'm fresh meat, and I don't know any better yet. Cell 18, Cell 22, Cell 26, all occupied. Men who killed, men who will die, here whether by execution or old, age or violence from other inmates. They watch us pass with eyes that don't blink enough. Some of them are asleep. Some of them are praying. Some of them are just staring at their walls, where the humidity makes patterns that almost look like faces. I'm trying not to look at the patterns. Landry told me not to look at the patterns. At 12:33 a.m., the humidity spikes. I feel it before I see it. The air gets heavier, harder to breathe, and my uniform sticks to my back with sweat that's too cold. The fluorescent lights flicker. Landry stops walking. He's staring at cell 29, and his hand is on his radio even though he's not calling anyone. Cell 29 is empty. Has been empty since April when they executed David Chen for killing his wife and her boyfriend. But the cell isn't empty now. There's someone inside. A shape made of moisture, made of the humidity that's condensing impossibly fast, forming into a silhouette that's standing in the center of the cell facing the wall. I can see through it, can see the concrete behind it, but it's solid enough to cast a shadow in the flickering light. Solid enough that when it turns around, I can see its face. David Chen's face, slack, dead. The way faces look after lethal injection when the muscles stop working and everything goes neutral. His mouth opens and water pours out, not speaking, just draining, like he's still dying, like he's been dying for 6 months and it won't stop. Landry grabs my arm and pulls me past the cell, doesn't run, doesn't acknowledge what we saw, just keeps walking at the same steady pace, marking cells as inspected, counting inmates who are breathing and inmates who aren't. At the end of the tier, he finally speaks. Don't look at them. Don't acknowledge them. They're not real. But his hand is shaking when he writes on his clipboard. What are they? I ask. My voice cracks. Fresh meat. Humidity. Landry says, just humidity. We continue rounds. Cell 34, cell 37, cell 41. The air is getting thicker. The walls are sweating. Water is pooling on the floor in puddles that shouldn't be there, that weren't there 20 minutes ago. In the puddles, I see reflections that don't match what's above them. I see men standing where no men are standing. I see faces looking up from beneath the water. The executed, over 600 of them since the 1970s, more before that. All of them dying in this prison. All of them leaving something behind. At 1:15 a.m., cell 43 starts screaming. Not the inmate, the cell itself. A sound like air being forced through wet lungs, through damaged vocal cords, through a throat that's been chemically burned. The inmate inside, a man named Torres, who's scheduled for execution in November, is pressed against the back wall with his hands over his ears. Make it stop, he's yelling. Make it stop. They're in here with me. They're touching me. They're so cold. Landry radios for medical, tells them Torres is having a mental health crisis. Doesn't mention that the humidity in cell 43 has formed into 3 distinct shapes. 3 figures standing around Torres's bed like they're waiting for him to lie down. 3 previous occupants of that cell. 3 men who were executed and never left. They're condensing from the air itself, pulling moisture from the atmosphere and shaping it into memory, into trauma, into the moment of death repeated endlessly. Medical arrives and extracts Torres. He's babbling about drowning, about water in his lungs, about hands made of humidity pulling him under. They sedate him. They take him to isolation. They mark it down as psychotic break, pre-execution stress, normal behavior for death row. Nobody mentions the 3 shapes that are still in cell 43. Nobody mentions that they're getting more solid, more detailed, that the one on the left is smiling. Landry and I finish the rounds. 2 more hours, 23 more cells, 7 more condensation shapes, 4 more inmates screaming about drowning, 1 inmate who isn't screaming, who's just sitting on his bed, staring at his hands, where the moisture's collecting, pooling between his fingers, running down his arms like he's dissolving from the inside out. Landry marks him as stable, doesn't approach, just marks it down and moves on. At 3:47 a.m., I see him, the shape that's been following us. He's not in a cell. He's in the corridor, walking behind us, matching our pace. He's tall, broad, and the humidity that forms him is darker than the others, denser, more concentrated. Landry sees him too. I know because Landry's jaw clenches and he walks faster. The shape keeps up. "Who is that?" I whisper. "First one," Landry says. "Executed here in 1983. Albert Giori. Triple homicide. Killed 2 guards during his trial. They electrocuted him 3 times before it took. The chair malfunctioned. He burned for 8 minutes while they fixed it. Conscious the whole time. Albert Giori's humidity shape is reaching for us. His hand extends, and where it passes through the air, the moisture condenses into droplets that fall like rain, like tears, like the sweat that poured off him while he burned. He opens his mouth, and steam comes out. The sound of screaming, the sound of flesh cooking, the sound of a man dying badly. I run. I break protocol. I run down the tier toward the security door while Landry shouts at me to stop, to maintain composure, to never run on death row. But I'm fresh meat, and I'm running, and behind me I can hear the humidity moving, not walking, flowing, chasing. The moisture in the air is alive, and it's angry, and it remembers everyone who put these men here, everyone who watched them die, everyone who worked in this prison built on suffering. I hit the security door, and my badge won't scan. The magnetic strip is wet. The moisture has gotten into everything. Landry catches up, breathing hard, and uses his badge. The door opens. We stumble through into the administrative corridor where the air is normal, dry, climate-controlled. Behind us, through the reinforced glass, I see them, dozens of them, shapes made of humidity, former inmates, executed men, all of them crowding the door, all of them condensing from the air, all of them remembering what it felt like to die. Landry doesn't file a report, doesn't mention it, just marks the shift as completed. Standard rounds, no incidents. When I try to bring it up, he cuts me off. "You saw humidity," he says. "Condensation, nothing more." But his hands are still shaking. I work 4 more shifts at Angola. On the 5th shift, I request transfer. They ask why. I say personal reasons. They approve it within 24 hours. Later, I find out Officer Landry put in for early retirement the same week. He's been at Angola for 33 years, and he's done. He's seen enough. He's watched enough men die and come back as moisture, as memory, as something that refuses to evaporate. Sometimes now, when the humidity gets bad in Louisiana summers, when the air is thick and wet and heavy, I see them in my apartment. Shapes forming in the condensation on my bathroom mirror. Faces appearing in the fog. The executed. The ones who died at Angola and can't leave because the place itself holds them. Because over 90% of men sent their die on those 18,000 acres, and the swamp around it breathes, and the moisture carries memory, and nothing that dies in Angola ever really leaves. They're still there, still condensing, still remembering, and with every execution, there's one more shape in the humidity, one more face in the fog, one more dead man who refuses to evaporate. You receive the invitation on a Tuesday. It arrives in your mailbox at the apartment on Dauphine Street, tucked between credit card offers and takeout menus. Heavy cardstock, cream-colored, with calligraphy and ink that looks wet even though it's dry. No return address, no postage. Just your name written in that fluid script, and below it, a single word: invited. Inside, the details are sparse. A crew name you've never heard of, Le Krewe des Ombres. A date, this Saturday. A time, 3 a.m. A location, the intersection of Royal and St. Philip, French Quarter. Dress, formal. Bring nothing. Leave nothing behind. You've been in New Orleans for 3 months. Marketing job, corporate relocation. The apartment came furnished, and the company paid first and last month's rent. And you're still learning which streets flood when it rains, which bars water down their drinks, which areas to avoid after dark. But you're trying. You're making an effort. You want to understand this city. You want to belong here. So when the invitation arrives, you don't question it. You don't research the crew. You don't ask neighbors if they've heard of it. You just feel chosen, special, like New Orleans is finally letting you in. Saturday comes. You put on the only formal wear you own, a suit you bought for your cousin's wedding 2 years ago. It's humid even at 2:45 a.m. when you leave your apartment. The French Quarter is never empty, never silent. But tonight the streets feel different. Quieter. The usual crowds on Bourbon are absent. The music from the bars sounds muted, distant, like it's coming from underwater. You walk down Dauphine to St. Philip, turn left, head toward Royal. The gas lamps cast shadows that move wrong, too slow, too fluid. At the intersection, you're not alone. There are others, maybe 15 people, all dressed formally, all holding cream-colored invitations, all looking around with the same expression you probably have, anticipation mixed with uncertainty. Nobody speaks. Nobody introduces themselves. You recognize that thing people do in cities, that deliberate avoidance of eye contact, that protective bubble of personal space. But there's something else too, fear. You see it in how their hands shake slightly, how they keep checking their phones, even though it's 2:50 to 8 a.m. and nobody's texting them, how they position themselves near street lamps like the light will protect them. At exactly 3:00 a.m., you hear it. Music. Not from any bar, not from any club, from down the street. Royal Street stretching south into darkness. And from that darkness, lights appear. Torches. Flambeaux. The old-fashioned kind carried on poles by men in robes. The flames illuminate their path, but somehow make the shadows deeper, make the buildings on either side seem to lean in, make the balconies overhead drip with something that isn't water. The parade approaches, slowly, deliberately. The music isn't recorded. It's live, played by musicians walking behind the torchbearers, brass instruments, drums. But the melody is wrong, inverted, like jazz played backwards, like something beautiful being corrupted in real time. You want to leave. Every instinct says leave, but your feet won't move. None of you move. You just stand there watching as the parade reaches your intersection and stops. The float is ornate, Victorian, covered in symbols you don't recognize, spirals and crosses, and things that might be letters in an alphabet that predates English. On top of the float, seated on a throne, is a figure in a plague doctor mask. The authentic kind. Leather and brass and that horrifying beak filled with herbs that did nothing to stop death in medieval Europe. The figure stands, points at your group, beckons. The torchbearers part, creating a path. The music continues, but now there are voices underneath it. Singing in French, Old French, Cajun French, Creole. Languages that shouldn't harmonize but do. The words are about carnival, about celebration, about the moment before Lent when all sins are permitted, about the masks we wear, about what happens when the mask becomes the face. You step forward. You don't choose to. Your body just moves. The others move too. All 15 of you walking in unison like you've rehearsed this, like you know exactly what to do even though you've never done this before. You step into the parade route. The torchbearers close, ranks behind you. You're part of it now, part of Le Crew des Ombres, the crew of shadows. The parade moves, you move with it. Walking down Royal Street past shuttered shops and dark galleries and restaurants that won't open for hours. The French Quarter at 3 a.m. should have people, drunk tourists, late-night workers, police on patrol. But the streets are empty. Just you and the crew and the music that sounds more wrong the longer you hear it. You notice details. The torchbearers aren't walking. They're gliding. Their feet don't quite touch the ground. The musicians have no faces under their masks. Just darkness. Just hollow spaces where faces should be. You pass Jackson Square. The statue of Andrew Jackson on his horse is turned around, facing away from the cathedral, facing toward you, following you with eyes that statues shouldn't have. You pass Muriel's restaurant, where legend says a ghost haunts the second floor. The ghost is in the window, watching. She's wearing a gown from the 1800s. She's holding a Mardi Gras mask. She's crying. You pass the LaLaurie mansion, where Madame LaLaurie tortured slaves in her attic. The house is breathing. You can see the walls expanding and contracting. You can hear screaming from inside even though the house has been empty for decades. The plague doctor figure descends from the float, walks through the parade toward your group, stops in front of each person, studies them. Some people it passes, some people it touches. When it touches them, they change. Their formal wear becomes costume. Elaborate costume. 18th century costume with masks made of porcelain and gold leaf and materials that shouldn't exist. The touched people smile. They fall into step with the crew. They become part of the performance. The plague doctor reaches you, tilts its head. The beak is inches from your face. You smell herbs, rosemary, lavender, and underneath, rot, old death, the kind that's been decaying for centuries. It raises one gloved hand. You see the glove is moving, writhing. Something's inside it. Many somethings, crawling. The hand touches your chest, right over your heart. Cold, spreading. Not cold like ice, cold like absence. Like heat is being extracted from your body at the cellular level. Your formal clothes don't change. You notice this. Everyone the plague doctor touched got costumes. You didn't. You look around. The others who weren't touched look confused, scared. They're trying to break away from the parade, but their feet won't obey. They're trapped in the procession. Prisoners, not participants. There's a difference. You're learning the difference. The parade turns onto a street that doesn't exist. You know the French Quarter. You've studied maps. You've walked every block. But this street isn't on any map. It's narrow, medieval narrow. The buildings on either side are older than they should be. Older than New Orleans. Older than America. The architecture is wrong. Spanish colonial mixed with French Creole mixed with something else. Something that predates both. The street signs are in Latin. The gas lamps burn purple. You're underground now. You don't remember descending. You don't remember stairs. But the ceiling overhead is stone. The walls are brick. The air is heavy with moisture and something else. Incense, sulfur, memory. The parade enters a chamber, a ballroom. Impossible. You're under the French Quarter. There are no ballrooms under the French Quarter. But you're here, in a space as large as the cathedral, carved from stone, lit by chandeliers made of bones. The crew members remove their masks. Underneath, they have no faces, just smooth skin where features should be. They're dancing now, waltzing with partners who aren't there, or partners you can't see, or partners who are there but exist in spectra your eyes don't register. The music is deafening. The musicians are multiplying. There are hundreds of them now, thousands, all playing that inverted jazz, all singing in dead languages. The plague doctor ascends to a throne at the chamber's far end, sits, removes its mask. You expect nothing underneath. You expect smooth skin like the others. But there's a face, your face, exactly your face, the same eyes, the same expression. It speaks with your voice. Welcome to the crew. We only parade once. We only choose once. You cannot leave the route. You cannot remove the mask even though you aren't wearing one yet. You'll understand soon. When the sun rises, when you try to go home, when you realize your apartment no longer exists, when you realize you no longer exist, except here, in the parade, in the crew, forever. The others are screaming, the ones who weren't costumed, the ones who, like you, were marked but not transformed. They're running for exits that seal themselves. They're pounding on stone walls that absorb the sound. They're calling for help into phones that show no signal. Even though you're not underground, you can't be underground. This is impossible. You're not running. You're watching your double on the throne. It's smiling. It stands. It walks towards you. It reaches out. When it touches you, you understand. This isn't a parade. It's a collection. Every year, La Krewe des Ombres parades at 3 a.m. Every year, it sends invitations to people who just moved here. People who are lonely. People who want to belong. People who receive cream-colored cards and don't question them. People who show up. The costumed ones get to join, get to become part of the crew, get to parade forever, through that impossible street, through that underground ballroom, through spaces between spaces where New Orleans keeps its secrets. The others get to serve, get to carry torches, get to play music, get to be the infrastructure that makes the parade possible. And you, the ones who look like the plague doctor, who match its face, you get to replace it. To take the throne, to choose next year's victims. Your double is fading, becoming translucent. Its year is done. It wore the mask. It selected the new crew. It found its replacement. You. It hands you the plague doctor mask. The leather is warm. The brass is pulsing. The beak smells like every Mardi Gras that ever happened. Every celebration, every excess, every sin forgiven because it's carnival. Every mask that became a face. Every face that disappeared behind a mask. You put it on. You don't choose to. Your hands just move. The mask fits perfectly. Inside it, you see everything. Every parade La Krewe des Ombres ever held. Every victim. Every street that doesn't exist. Every ballroom under every city. Every celebration that went too far. Every festival that never ended. The sun rises. The chamber fades. You're back on Royal Street. 7 a.m. The French Quarter is waking up. Shops opening, coffee shops brewing. Tourists already wandering with go-cups and cameras. You're still wearing your formal clothes. You're still holding the cream-colored invitation. But you're not you. Not anymore. You're the crew. You're the parade. You're the plague doctor. You walk back to Dauphine Street, to the address where your apartment used to be. The building is still there. But when you check the mailbox, your name isn't listed. When you try your key, it doesn't fit. When you ask the person leaving the building about the unit you rented, they tell you that unit's been empty for 6 months. Nobody's lived there since the last tenant disappeared. Vanished, right around Mardi Gras. Right after receiving an invitation, you still have the mask. You carry it with you, everywhere. Sometimes you wear it. Late at night. At 3 a.m., when you walk the French Quarter planning next year's parade, selecting next year's route, writing next year's invitations in calligraphy that looks wet even after it dries. Because in New Orleans, some crews never stop parading. Some celebrations never end. Some masks never come off. And some invitations shouldn't be accepted. But you didn't know that. None of them did. None of them do. They just want to belong. Just want to be chosen. Just want to be part of something special. The crew provides. The crew welcomes. The crew parades forever through streets that don't exist in a city that contains multitudes. See you next Mardi Gras. You'll be sending invitations. The processing house stands 300 yards from where the main plantation house collapsed in 1973. GPS coordinates place it at 30 /425 degree N, 90.7 degree Deribu, approximately 2 miles upriver from the Sunshine Bridge. The structure measures 40 feet by 60 feet, constructed from handmade brick circa 1842 with timber reinforcement. The roof has partially collapsed on the eastern side. The western wall shows significant fire damage consistent with historical records of an 1856 boiler explosion that killed 7 enslaved workers during grinding season. This is my 3rd day documenting the site for my thesis on industrial architecture's role in Louisiana's antebellum economy. The interior is remarkably intact, given 169 years of abandonment and weathering. The Jamaica train system remains. 5 cast iron kettles arranged in descending size, each originally heated by furnaces beneath. The kettles would have processed raw cane juice through progressive boiling stages until crystallization occurred. The largest kettle, the Grande, still sits in position despite the explosion that killed the workers. Parish death records from October 1856 list the names: Samuel, age unknown; Moses, age unknown; Jean-Baptiste, age unknown; Marie, age unknown; Petit Jacques, age 14; Celeste, age unknown; Thomas, age unknown. The records specify death by scalding and fire, but provide no other details. Enslaved people's lives were poorly documented, their deaths even less so. I'm recording measurements and photographing structural elements when I notice the temperature differential. My thermal camera shows the Grande kettle reading 89 degrees Fahrenheit. Ambient temperature is 63 degrees. There's no heat source. No sun penetration through the collapsed roof reaches this section. No reasonable explanation for a 26-degree variance. I approach the kettle and place my hand near the cast iron surface. Warmth radiates from it. Not residual heat, active warmth, as if something inside is generating temperature. The kettle is empty, has been empty for over a century. I photograph the thermal reading for my records. At 4:47 p.m., I hear the sound, mechanical, rhythmic, like gears engaging, like metal scraping metal, like machinery operating. The sound is coming from the kettle system. I stand completely still, recording equipment in hand, watching the Grande kettle. Nothing moves. The sound continues, growing louder. I identify specific components. The creak of the paddle mechanism that would have stirred boiling juice. The groan of the furnace doors opening. The hiss of steam venting. These are sounds this building hasn't made since 1856. Since the explosion. Since the workers died. My rational mind catalogs explanations. Wind through damaged sections, creating acoustic effects. Settling foundations causing metal stress. Animals nesting in machinery. But the sounds are too precise, too synchronized, too deliberately sequential, as if someone is operating equipment according to the exact process used during grinding season. First the furnaces, then the Grande heating, then the paddle mechanism engaging, the Jamaica train system activating step by step. The temperature spikes. My thermal camera now reads 134 degrees from the Grande kettle, rising rapidly. 150, 170, 200. The cast iron is glowing dull red in the fading daylight. This is impossible. There's no fire, no fuel source, no combustion occurring. Yet the kettle is heating as if furnaces beneath it are roaring at full capacity. Steam rises from inside it, not from water, from nothing, from empty air that's being heated past boiling point. I should leave. Every preservation protocol I've studied mandates evacuation during structural anomalies. But I'm documenting. I'm recording. This is unprecedented. My thesis advisor will want evidence. I position my camera to capture the kettle system, and that's when I see them. Shapes, moving through the steam. Human shapes. 7 of them. Working. Operating the machinery. Transferring phantom cane juice from kettle to kettle using ladles that don't exist. Following the Jamaica train process. Performing labor that killed them 169 years ago. They're not translucent. They're not ghostly. They're solid. Real, built from steam and heat and historical trauma made manifest. I can see details, torn clothing, burns on exposed skin, exhaustion in their movements. They're working in grinding season conditions, 20-hour shifts, extreme heat, no breaks, no water, no rest. The youngest one, Petit Jacques, age 14, is operating the paddle mechanism. His hands are blistered. His face is streaming with sweat. He's looking directly at me. His mouth moves. No sound emerges, but I understand. Help us. 2 words. Simple, desperate, repeated. All 7 are saying it now. Help us. Their movements are accelerating. The machinery sounds grow louder. The temperature climbs. 250 degrees. 300. The kettle metal is white hot. The steam is scalding. I'm backing toward the entrance, but the door I came through has sealed. Not closed. Sealed. Overgrown with vegetation that wasn't there 5 minutes ago. Brick has shifted. The opening no longer exists. The workers are surrounding me now, herding me toward the kettle system. Their faces show no malice, no anger, just need, desperate need. They're reaching for me with hands that burn, with fingers made of scalding steam, with palms that retain the memory of boiling cane juice splashing across them. Samuel grabs my wrist. The heat is immediate, agonizing. I scream, try to pull away. His grip strengthens. Moses takes my other arm. Jean-Baptiste and Thomas seize my shoulders. They're dragging me toward the grand kettle, toward the white-hot cast iron, toward the steam that's thick enough to suffocate. "Help us," Marie says. Her voice is audible now, raw, damaged. "You must help us. You must understand. You must feel what we felt." She's holding a ladle. The ladle is full of liquid that glows orange-red, molten. She raises it toward my face. This is how it was. This is how it happened. The juice boiled over. The kettle cracked. The explosion came. We couldn't run. We were chained. Did you know that? Did your thesis mention that? We were chained to the machinery during grinding season so we couldn't escape, so we couldn't rest, so we would die if anything went wrong. I'm fighting, thrashing. My skin is blistering where they touch me. The heat is overwhelming. Celeste forces my head down toward the grande kettle. Inside I see cane juice boiling. Real cane juice, or the memory of it, or something that exists between memory and reality. The surface roils, bubbles burst, steam erupts, and beneath the surface I see faces. Not reflections, faces looking up from inside the boiling liquid. Hundreds of them. Thousands. Every enslaved person who died processing sugar in Louisiana. Every person who was scalded, burned, crushed, exhausted to death making white gold for people who considered them property. The liquid rises, spills over the kettle rim, flows across the floor. It's not juice, it's blood. Hot blood, boiling blood. The blood of every person this industry consumed. The processing house floor is flooding with it. Ankle deep, knee deep, still rising. The temperature is unbearable. My camera has melted. My phone is dead. My skin is cooking. The 7 workers are speaking in unison now, their voices layered, harmonized, backed by thousands more voices. You came to document, to study, to write your thesis about architecture and industry and historic preservation. But you never asked what it cost. You never calculated the price paid in flesh and pain and death. Now you'll learn. Now you'll understand. Now you'll become part of the structure you're studying. The machinery roars. All 5 kettles are operating. The paddle mechanisms are spinning at impossible speed. The furnace doors are open, and inside I see flames that burn without fuel. Flames fed by rage and injustice, and suffering that never got justice, that never got acknowledged, that got buried under euphemisms like plantation life and antebellum architecture and historic preservation. Petit Jacques, 14 years old when he died, is smiling at me. We run every night, he says. Grinding season never ends. We process forever. And anyone who comes here to study us, to photograph us, to document us without honoring us, they join the workforce. The house needs workers. The house needs fuel. The house needs your pain to match ours. The boiling blood reaches my chest, my waist, my shoulders. I'm drowning in it, drowning in the accumulated suffering of an industry built on human bodies. The workers release me. I sink. The blood closes over my head. It's thick, viscous, hot enough to kill, but I'm not dying. I'm transforming, becoming part of the processing house, part of the machinery, part of the structure that grinds continuously, that operates without rest, that processes suffering into something architectural historians can study from a safe distance. When the blood recedes, I'm still standing, but I'm not alone in my body anymore. 7 others are here with me. Samuel, Moses, Jean-Baptiste, Marie, Petit Jacques, Celeste, Thomas. We share this space now. We share these hands, these eyes, this purpose. The sun has set. The processing house is dark except for the glow from the kettles that burn forever. Through the broken roof, I see stars. Through my own eyes, our eyes, I see the door reopening, the vegetation receding, the exit becoming accessible. We walk out together. 8 consciousnesses in one body. My documentation equipment is intact after all. The thermal camera shows normal temperatures. The photographs show empty kettles. No steam, no workers, no blood, just abandoned machinery in a derelict building. But I know what happened. They know I know, and they know I'll come back tomorrow night, and the next night, and every night during grinding season from October to Christmas, because the processing house needs workers, because the machinery must run, because suffering this profound doesn't evaporate. It condenses, it concentrates, it processes. I drive back to New Orleans. My hands, our hands, are steady on the wheel. In the rearview mirror, I see 8 faces overlapping. 8 people who died so sugar could flow, so wealth could accumulate, so plantations could thrive, so architectural historians could write theses about industrial design without mentioning the cost. My thesis will be different now. It will be complete. It will include every detail, every scream, every burn, every death. Because Belle Reeve's processing house isn't abandoned. It's operating, every night, forever, processing the one resource that never depletes in Louisiana: trauma. And anyone who enters seeking to study history without honoring it becomes part of the operation, becomes another worker, another consciousness trapped in the machinery, another fuel source for kettles that burn without wood. The grinding never stops. The season never ends. The house always needs workers, and I'll be returning tomorrow night. We'll be returning, all 8 of us, because the Jamaica train must run. I drove up to Mama's place in Pierrepart on a Friday afternoon with my cooler full of beer and my contribution to the crawfish boil, 20 pounds of corn, 30 pounds of red potatoes, and a case of Abida from the gas station in Donaldsonville. The annual Boudreau family reunion happens the first weekend in May every year, right at the peak of crawfish season when the mudbugs are fat and the price is right. We've been doing this since I was a kid, back when Papa was still alive, and would spend 3 days catching crawfish himself in Belle River instead of ordering from Blanchard's like we do now. Mama's house sits right on the bayou, one of those old Cajun cottages that's been added onto so many times you can see the architectural history in the different siding materials. My brother Trent was already there with his wife Nicole and their 2 kids. My sister Evangeline pulled in right behind me with her boyfriend Marcus, who we'd all just met at Christmas. Uncle Paul and Aunt Simone were setting up the propane burner in the backyard. Cousin Raymond was testing the giant 80-quart pot, everyone moving in that familiar dance of preparation that happens when your family has been throwing the same party for 43 years. Raymond had ordered the crawfish from his usual supplier, Belle River Crawfish, supposedly the cleanest because the water's better than what you get out of the Atchafalaya. 2 sacks of live ones, about 90 pounds total. They were still moving when we dumped them in the ice chest to purge, their little claws waving, their antennae searching. That's how you know they're fresh. Dead crawfish are no good. Mama always says if they're not trying to crawl away, don't put them in your mouth. Uncle Paul got the water boiling while we all caught up, drinking beers, the kids running around the yard playing tag between the live oak trees. The air smelled like Louisiana spring, wet earth, honeysuckle, and the green-brown scent of the bayou. Trent was telling the story about the time Papa's boat sank during a fishing trip. Evangeline was showing off pictures from her new job in Baton Rouge. Marcus was trying to understand our accents, Everything was normal. Everything was perfect. Everything was exactly like it always was. Raymond added the seasoning to the boiling water. Zatarain's crawfish boil, plus his own secret additions that he'd never share. The smell hit immediately. That aggressive Cajun spice blend that makes your eyes water from 6 feet away. He waited for the water to really take on that deep red color before adding the potatoes first, then the onions and garlic, then the mushrooms and corn. We all watched the pot like it was television. Mama brought out more beers. Aunt Simone set the picnic table with newspaper. The ritual continued. "Y'all notice those crawfish are real active," Raymond said, staring into the ice chest. "Like more than usual." I looked. He was right. The crawfish weren't just moving. They were frantic, climbing over each other, clacking their claws, almost aggressive. But purging crawfish always makes them irritated. You're essentially stressing them out so they clean their systems before cooking. Still, something about the way they were moving seemed off. Too coordinated, too purposeful. "They know what's coming," Trent laughed. "Smart little bastards." Raymond dumped them in the boiling water. The standard 7-minute cook time, then a 15-minute soak to let them absorb all that seasoning. We cracked more beers. The kids asked if it was ready yet. Uncle Paul told his version of the boat sinking story, which contradicted Trent's version. Normal family stuff. Normal Louisiana Friday evening. Nothing wrong, except when Raymond drained the pot and poured the crawfish out onto the newspaper-covered table, something was off. The color wasn't right. Crawfish should be bright red after boiling. That's what the heat does to the shell pigment. But these were darker, almost maroon, almost purple in places, and they were still steaming more than they should be, like the heat was coming from inside them instead of just from the cooking. "Might have overcooked them," Raymond said, but his voice had uncertainty in it. "We sat down to eat anyway. You don't waste 90 pounds of crawfish just because the color's a little off." Mama said grace. We dug in. The standard technique: twist the tail, suck the head, pull the meat out with your teeth. First bite tastes like coming home, like every spring since childhood, like Louisiana distilled into one perfect mouthful of spicy, sweet crawfish meat. But the texture was wrong. Too soft, too wet, and the taste had something underneath the seasoning. Something bitter, something that tasted like the bayou smells when it's low tide and things are dying in the mud. "These taste funny to y'all?" Evangeline asked. "Little muddy, maybe," Uncle Paul said. "Probably didn't purge long enough." We kept eating, because that's what you do. You don't waste food. You don't criticize the cook. You don't ruin the reunion. Trent ate a dozen. Uncle Paul ate 15. Nicole was showing Marcus how to peel them properly. The kids were fighting over who got the corn. Everything was normal except for that taste that lingered, except for the way the crawfish meat seemed to move slightly, even after you pulled it from the shell. Trent was the first one to change. It happened about 20 minutes after he finished eating. He went quiet, stopped talking mid-sentence about his new truck. Just stopped. Sat there, staring at his plate with an expression that wasn't quite blank, but wasn't quite present either, like someone had turned his volume down. "Trent, you okay?" Nicole touched his arm. He turned to look at her, and his head moved wrong. Too smooth, too fluid, like someone was operating him with a joystick instead of muscles and nerves. "Fine," he said, but his voice was flat, monotone. "Everything's fine." Then Uncle Paul went quiet. Then Raymond. Then Evangeline. One by one, everyone who'd eaten the crawfish stopped being themselves. They didn't collapse. They didn't scream. They just became subdued, compliant, and their movements synchronized. When Uncle Paul reached for his beer, Raymond reached for his at the exact same moment. When Trent shifted in his seat, Evangeline shifted identically. Mama noticed it. I noticed it. Marcus noticed it because he'd barely eaten any crawfish, said they were too spicy for him. Nicole noticed because she was breastfeeding and hadn't eaten much. The 5 of us looked at each other across the table while the other 7 sat in perfect stillness, breathing in unison. "What's wrong with them?" Nicole whispered. Before anyone could answer, they stood up, all 7 of them, at exactly the same instant, moving as one organism split across 7 bodies. They turned toward the bayou, toward the water where the crawfish came from, toward Bell River that feeds into the swamp, that feeds into the Atchafalaya, that contains things older than humans, things that lived in those waters before we ever got here and will live there long after we're gone. We need to go back, they said in unison, 7 voices speaking the exact same words in the exact same rhythm. We need to return. The water is calling. The water wants us home. They started walking toward the bayou. Mama grabbed Trent's arm, but he shook her off with strength that wasn't his. Nicole tried to hold Raymond back, but he pushed past her. Marcus and I tackled Uncle Paul, but he fought us off with movements that were too coordinated, too precise, like he was being controlled by something with better reflexes than humans should have. The kids were crying. Mama was screaming. The 7 of them reached the water's edge and kept walking, into Bell River, into the bayou that was dark and still and reflecting the sunset in colors that looked wrong. They walked until the water reached their knees, their waists, their chests, and they kept walking. Nicole ran in after Raymond, but Marcus pulled her back. I was wading in after Trent, but the water was cold, impossibly cold for May, and something brushed against my leg. Something with claws. Something that wasn't a crawfish. Something much larger. I scrambled back to shore. The 7 of them were neck-deep now, still walking in perfect synchronization, still moving toward the center of the river, where the current runs fast and deep. Mama was praying in French, the old prayers, the ones her grandmother taught her, the ones for protection against things the swamp holds. Then they stopped, just stood there in chest-deep water, turned back to face us on shore, and smiled. All 7 of them, the exact same smile, not their smiles. Something else wearing their faces. The crawfish weren't dead, Trent's body said, with a voice that wasn't Trent's voice. They were carrying us. We live in the water, in the bayou, in the shells and meat and blood of every creature that swims here. You invited us to your table. You ate us. Now we're eating you from the inside. Now we wear you. Now we walk on land. They spoke in unison, 7 mouths forming the same words. Every year you harvest us, boil us alive, crack our shells, suck our heads. Now we harvest you, not your bodies, your minds, your control, your autonomy. We puppeteer you now, and through you, we'll feed others, we'll spread. Next week, there's another reunion, another boil, another family gathering, and we'll be in those crawfish too. We'll be in every crawfish caught from Bell River. We'll be in the water. We'll be in the food. We'll be inside you. Raymond's body tilted its head at an angle that would break a human neck. You should have checked the traps. Raymond's usual supplier didn't catch these. We placed them in his traps. We wanted to be caught. We wanted to be cooked. We wanted to be consumed. That's how we reproduce now. That's how we spread. Through the tradition, through the culture, through the crawfish boil. Mama was still praying. The kids were hidden in the house. Marcus had his phone out trying to call 911, but there's no service this far into Pierrepart. Never has been. Nicole was sobbing, and the 7 bodies in the water were just standing there, smiling, waiting. As the sun set, they walked back to shore, dripping, moving in perfect sync. They sat back down at the table, picked up crawfish, started eating again. But they weren't eating. They were absorbing. The crawfish meat dissolved into their skin on contact, feeding whatever was inside them, making it stronger. Eat with us, they said to those of us who hadn't. Join us. The water welcomes all. The bayou takes everyone eventually. Why wait? We didn't eat. We grabbed the kids and get in our cars and drove away from Mama's house, while 7 bodies sat at that table feeding themselves crawfish under the darkening Louisiana sky. We drove to the police station in Belle Rose. Tried to explain. They said they'd do a wellness check, but their faces said they thought we were drunk. Crazy, making up stories. 3 days later, all 7 of them came home. back to their regular lives in Baton Rouge, in Lafayette, in New Orleans. They acted normal, went to work, took care of their kids, but their movements were still slightly synchronized when they were together, and they kept trying to convince us to come over for dinner, for a crawfish étouffée, for a seafood boil, for just a little taste. It's been 2 weeks. Mama won't go back to her house. She's staying with me in Lafayette. She keeps saying prayers, keeps salt around the doors, keeps checking the news for missing persons reports, for strange behavior, for any sign that it's spreading beyond our family. Crawfish season ends in July. Just 6 more weeks of harvest. 6 more weeks of boils happening across Louisiana. Thousands of families. Thousands of gatherings. And we don't know which crawfish are carrying them, which traps they've gotten into, which suppliers are unknowingly distributing them to restaurants, to grocery stores, to church fundraisers, to backyard parties. The water is patient. The bayou is patient. And something in Belle River has learned how to walk on land using our bodies as vessels. They're still calling me. All 7 of them. Every day. Asking when I'm free for dinner. I arrived in St. Martinville this afternoon. The town is smaller than I expected, quieter. Bayou Teche runs through it like a vein carrying memory instead of blood. My ancestry DNA results came back 3 months ago, showing 47% Acadian heritage. That's what started all this. The need to understand where I came from. My mother died before she could tell me our family's full story. My father left when I was 6. I have no siblings. Just me and these genetic markers pointing back to people who were expelled from Nova Scotia in 1755, who wandered for decades searching for somewhere to call home, who ended up here in Louisiana's swamps and bayous, building new lives from trauma. The genealogy trail led me to parish records, to church baptisms, to names that connected across centuries. Thibodeau, Broussard, Landry, LeBlanc. My bloodline stretches back through generations of fishermen and farmers, and people who survived by refusing to forget who they were. The Evangeline oak is where tourists come to take pictures. But for people like me, searching for roots, it represents something else. A symbol of longing, of loss, of love that couldn't survive displacement. I'm staying at the old Castillo bed and breakfast tonight. Tomorrow I'll visit the tree, touch it, connect with my ancestors, feel something. October 16th, 2025, 3:47 p.m. I found the oak easily. It stands on the edge of Bayou Teche at the foot of Port Street. Massive and ancient, branches spreading like arms that have been waiting 300 years to embrace someone. The bark is rough, scarred by time and weather, and the hands of thousands of visitors who came before me. There's a bronze plaque, a statue of Evangeline nearby, tourist infrastructure around a moment of profound sadness. Emmeline Labiche meeting Louis Arsenault beneath this tree after years of separation, only to discover he had married another. She lost her mind from the grief, died broken. I stood there for 20 minutes building courage. Other visitors took selfies. A family posed their children by the statue. Nobody treated it like what it was, a monument to devastating heartbreak. I waited until they left, stepped forward, placed both palms flat against the bark, closed my eyes. The first wave hit immediately, not a vision, an experience. I was standing at a ship's rail watching Nova Scotia disappear behind me. Year 1755. I was Evangeline. No, I was Marie-Claire Thibodeau. Different woman, same pain. My husband Joseph had been forced onto a different ship. We'd been married 6 weeks. 6 weeks of happiness before the British came with bayonets and torches. Before they separated families. Before they loaded us like cargo. I felt the ship's movement. Smelled the salt and sickness. Heard crying. Felt the weight of not knowing if I'd ever see him again. The emotion was physical. A hole in my chest. Grief so profound it had mass. Then it shifted. Another woman. Another time. Anne Broussard, 1763, meeting her. Fiancé René beneath a different tree in a different settlement after 8 years apart. Him telling her he couldn't wait. He'd married someone else. Her collapsing. The pain sharper than knife wounds. Love curdling into something else. Something that doesn't have a word because the English language wasn't built to contain this specific type of devastation. I pulled my hands away, gasping. My face was wet. I'd been crying without realizing it. My chest hurt. Actually hurt, like my heart was trying to process emotions that weren't mine but felt real. Felt true. I sat on the bench near the tree trying to breathe normally. A tourist asked if I was okay. I nodded. Lied. Walked back to my room. October 16th, 2025, 11:34 p.m. I can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see their faces. Marie Claire, Anne, others, dozens of them. Women and men who stood at this tree throughout centuries, experiencing their own versions of loss. The tree holds them. Holds their moments. Their breaking points. I've been researching. The original Evangeline oak isn't even the first tree to bear that name. There have been 3 different oaks designated as the Evangeline oak over the years. But maybe that doesn't matter. Maybe every oak on Bayou Teche in St. Martinville has absorbed these stories. Maybe the trees are witnesses, memory keepers. I keep touching my chest where the pain was. It's faded to an ache, but it's still there. Still real. I came here looking for connection to my heritage. I found it. But now I can't unfeel it. October 17th, 2025, 9:12 a.m. I went back. I know I shouldn't have, but I needed to understand. Needed to trace my specific lineage. Needed to know if any of my ancestors stood at this tree experiencing their own losses. I brought my research notes. Family trees, names and dates. The oak was waiting. That's how it felt. Like the tree was expecting me. I placed my hands on the bark again. This time I didn't close my eyes. This time I held on. The visions came faster, harder, clearer. Joseph Landry returning to St. Martinville in 1768 searching for his wife Marguerite, only to find her grave. 3 years he searched. She'd been dead for 2. Died in childbirth alone without him. Him collapsing at the tree, screaming. The sound echoing across centuries. I heard it. I felt it in my bones. Then Catherine Brough in 1801, waiting at the tree for her husband to return from a trapping expedition. Him never coming back. Her returning every day for 40 years. Standing at the tree, waiting, eventually dying while standing there, her body being found slumped against the trunk. The tree absorbing her final breath, her final hope. Henri Thibodeau, my ancestor, I realized with horror. Bringing his daughter to the tree in 1834 after his wife Elise left him for another man. Him telling the child that her mother wasn't coming back. The child crying. Him crying. Both of them holding the tree like it could ground them, like oak roots could substitute for family. The tree taking their tears, taking their grief, storing it. I couldn't let go. My hands were stuck, not physically. I could have pulled away. But something in me needed to know, needed to experience it all, needed to feel every heartbreak my bloodline endured. October 17th, 2025, 4:28 p.m. I've been at the tree for 7 hours. I know because my phone shows the time, but I don't remember any of it passing. Just experience after experience, loss after loss. 300 years of people coming to this oak to process devastation. Emmeline, Louis. The original story that started the legend, but also Jean-Marc and Sylvie, Robert and Josephine, Thomas and Marie, Antoine and Celeste. Names from my genealogy charts, names from my DNA, my family. All of them broken by the same pattern: separation, displacement, loss, heartbreak. The tourist who asked if I was okay yesterday has called someone. I can see a police officer approaching. I should let go, should stop, but I can't. Because I'm in 1947 now. War II just ended. James Thibodeau, my grandfather, standing at this tree after getting a telegram that his brother Paul died in France, him touching the oak, crying, asking why the Thibodeau family can't escape tragedy, why every generation loses someone, why love always ends in separation. Then, 1989, my mother, 23 years old, standing at this same tree after my father left her pregnant with me, her placing her hands on the bark, asking the tree for strength, asking her ancestors for guidance, crying for the marriage that failed, for the loneliness ahead, for the daughter she'd raise alone, the tree absorbing her pain, taking her tears, adding them to 3 centuries of accumulated grief. I'm sobbing now. The police officer is talking, but I can't hear him, because I'm experiencing my mother's heartbreak firsthand. I'm feeling what she felt, the abandonment, the fear, the determination to survive for her child. For me, the tree showed me. The tree wanted me to understand that I'm not researching strangers. I'm researching pain that runs through my DNA like a genetic curse. October 17th, 2025, 11:47 p.m. They took me to the hospital. Dehydration, emotional distress. They asked if I'd taken drugs. I hadn't. Just touched a tree. Just connected to my heritage. Just experienced 300 years of Akkadian trauma compressed into 7 hours. They gave me fluids, sedatives, released me. I'm back at the Castillo. I can still feel them. All of them. Marie Claire, Anne, Joseph, Henri, my grandfather, my mother. Every person who ever stood at that oak and bled their pain into the wood. The tree doesn't just witness. It collects. It demands. If you come seeking connection to the past, it gives you that connection. Full weight, full horror, full devastating emotional truth. My hands have marks where I gripped the bark, like burns, but not burns. Like the tree branded me, claimed me, added me to its collection because I gave it something too. My own pain, my own losses. Mother dead from cancer, father gone, loneliness, the heartbreak of having no one. The tree took it, absorbed it, added it to the 3 centuries of grief it holds. October 18th, 2025, 6:13 a.m. I'm leaving St. Martinville today, but the tree isn't letting me go. Not really. Every time I close my eyes, I'm back there, experiencing another loss, another heartbreak. Jean in 1777, Mark in 1823, Isabel in 1901. It's not stopping. The tree opened something in me, and now it's flooding through. All the accumulated pain of my bloodline. All the losses my ancestors experienced. All the love that failed. All the separations that destroyed. I understand now why Emmeline Labiche lost her sanity. It wasn't just losing Louis. It was experiencing the weight of every separation the Akkadian people endured. The tree didn't just show her Louis married to someone else. It showed her everyone, every exile, every lost love, every family torn apart. The tree demanded she carry all of it, and it broke her mind. It's breaking mine. October 19th, 2025, 2:34. I didn't leave. I couldn't. The pain kept coming in waves. Every time I tried to pack, every time I tried to start my car, another ancestor, another loss. Felipe in 1759, Adrienne in 1812, Gerard in 1873, names I'd researched but never understood. Now I understand. Now I feel what they felt. The tree gave me what I asked for: connection, heritage, roots. It gave me all of it. Every devastating moment, every heartbreak. I can't carry this. No one can carry this. I went back to the tree at midnight, begged it to stop, begged it to take back what it showed me, to release me. The bark was warm under my hands, pulsing like a heartbeat, like the oak was alive in ways trees shouldn't be. It didn't respond, didn't release me, just showed me more. My mother's death, her cancer, her pain in the final weeks, her last words to me about being strong, about honoring our family, about never forgetting who we were. The tree taking those memories and reflecting them back at me with intensity that made them unbearable. I'm writing this from Evangeline Oak Park, sitting on the bench. It's 2:34 a.m. I've been here for 4 hours. The tree is 10 feet away. I can feel it pulling, wanting me to touch it again, wanting to show me more, to give me the full 300 years, every single loss, every single heartbreak, every single moment of devastating separation that has occurred beneath its branches or in its presence or within the emotional field it creates. October 20th, 2025. Time unknown. I'm not sure when I wrote the last entry. The days are blurring. The tree calls constantly now. Even from my room I feel it. Feel the pull. Feel the weight of unfinished experiencing. There are still more stories, more losses, more ancestors I haven't felt yet. The tree won't let me leave until I've absorbed all of it, until I've carried every ounce of pain my bloodline endured, until I've paid the price of asking for connection. My hands won't stop shaking. I see their faces in mirrors, in windows, in water, Marie Claire, Henri, my mother, all of them watching, waiting for me to understand, waiting for me to carry them. The tree made me a vessel, made me a repository, made me responsible for remembering. October, date unknown. I live at the tree now. The Castillo let me check out. I didn't have anywhere else to go anyway. I sleep on the bench, eat from vending machines at the tourist center, spend all day and night with my hands on the bark experiencing. Always experiencing. Jean-Paul in 1798, Margot in 1856, Claude in 1923. The losses never end because the tree never stops collecting. Every day, someone somewhere experiences heartbreak. And if they have Acadian blood, if they have connection to St. Martinville, if they have lineage that touches this place, the tree feels it, absorbs it, adds it to the collection. I'm part of the collection now too, part of the tree's memory. When someone else comes seeking roots, seeking connection, seeking to understand their heritage, they'll feel me. They'll experience my loneliness, my mother's abandonment, my father's leaving, 300 years of accumulated Acadian pain plus mine, plus whoever comes after me, plus everyone who ever will come. The tree grows from grief, roots deeper with every loss, branches spread wider with every heartbreak. It's not a memorial, it's a feeding system, and we keep feeding it by touching, by seeking, by asking questions we're not prepared to have answered. No date. Someone's reading this. I can feel you. You found my journal on the bench. You're curious. You want to touch the tree too. You want connection to your ancestors. You want to understand your Acadian heritage, your Thibodeau blood, your Broussard lineage, your Landry roots. Don't. The tree remembers everything, and once you touch it, once you connect, it won't let you forget, won't let you leave, won't let you be anything except a carrier for 3 centuries of loss. But you'll touch it anyway. I can feel your hand reaching, feel your fingers getting closer to the bark, feel the tree pulling you the way it pulled me, the way it pulls everyone who comes seeking answers. When you do, when your palm makes contact, when the first vision hits, remember this. Remember I warned you. Remember that heritage has a price. Remember that roots dig into pain as often as they dig into pride. The tree is waiting. It's always waiting. And it's so very, very hungry. Hey, food fam. 3 days into the legendary Southwest Louisiana Boudin Trail, and I'm approximately 7 pounds heavier and 0% regretful. If you've been following this series, you know I've been hitting all the classic spots. Billy's in Scott, Best Stop in Scott, Johnson's Grocery in Eunice. Each place has its own spin on the classic rice and pork sausage that defines Cajun country. But today I found something special. I was driving Highway 90 through Jefferson Davis Parish when I spotted it, Hebert's Meat Market in a tiny crossroads outside Jennings. The hand-painted sign claimed, famous since 1923, Best Boudin in Louisiana. You know I can't resist a superlative claim like that. The building is weathered cypress, probably original, with a gravel parking lot and a screen door that slams with that perfect Louisiana sound. Inside, it's exactly what you want. Sawdust on the concrete floor, a glass case full of links and cracklins, and the smell of smoke and seasoning that makes your mouth water instantly. The proprietor is an older man, maybe 70. Name tag says Claude Heber. Thick Cajun accent. Doesn't smile much, but has that quiet confidence of someone who knows their product is superior. I ordered 2 links, hot. He wrapped them in butcher paper without a word, took my cash, made change. The transaction had a ritualistic quality to it. Now here's where it gets interesting. This Boudin is incredible. Best I've had on the trail, hands down. The rice has perfect texture. The seasoning is complex. I'm tasting cayenne, black pepper, green onion, maybe a hint of liver. But there's something else, something I can't identify. An almost metallic undertone that makes the flavor linger longer than normal. It's not unpleasant. It's just distinctive. Makes you want another bite immediately. I bought 6 more links to go. Claude watched me eat with an expression I can't quite read. Not hostile, not friendly, just observant. When I asked about his secret, he said, "Family recipe. Been making it the same way since my grandfather opened this place. Same process, same ingredients, never changed." Something about the way he said same ingredients gave me a weird vibe, but the Boudin is legitimately phenomenal. Posting location for those of you following along. 5 stars. Will definitely return. Hey everyone. Quick post because several of you messaged asking about Hebert's Meat Market. I did some research, and here's what I found. The place has been continuously operated by the Hebert family since 1923. That's 102 years of the same recipe. Pretty impressive consistency. But here's something odd. I can't find any online reviews before 2020. For a place claiming to be famous for over a century, there's almost no digital footprint, no historical photos, no newspaper articles. The few reviews that do exist are all 5 stars, and all mention that distinctive flavor I noted. Also, I drove back this morning to get more. Yes, I'm obsessed. And the parking lot had 3 cars with out-of-state plates. Someone drove from Arkansas. Someone from East Texas. That's commitment for Boudin, even really good Boudin. The shop was busier this time. Claude and another man, maybe his son. Same build, same silent intensity. We're working the counter. I noticed they only sell Boudin. No cracklins, no stuffed chickens, no andouille, just Boudin. When I asked why, Claude said, "We do one thing. We do it right. Don't need to do nothing else." Fair enough. Purists, I respect it. Got another pound, eating it as I type this. That metallic undertone is more noticeable today. Not bad. Just present. Comments, 189. Likes, 1923. Post, first 49. Something's not right posted, May 14th, 2025, 11:47 p.m. Okay, this is going to sound paranoid, but I need to document this. I went back to Hebert's today. 3rd day in a row, I know, but their Boudin is addictive in a way I can't explain. Here's what happened. There was a woman ahead of me in line. Tourist, definitely. She was asking Claude about the history of the shop. He gave her the standard family recipe since 1923 line. Then she asked, and I swear this is verbatim, "Is it true about the missing people?" Claude's face went completely blank. Not angry, not defensive, just empty. He stared at her for maybe 10 seconds without blinking. Then he said, "I don't know what you mean, ma'am. That'll be $8.50. She paid. She left. She looked shaken. After she was gone, I asked Claude what that was about. He wiped down the counter and said, "Some people tell stories. Highway 90 goes through lonely country. People disappear sometimes. Got nothing to do with us." Then he looked directly at me and said, "You've been coming here a lot. You like the Boudin?" I told him it was the best I'd ever had. He smiled for the first time. It didn't reach his eyes. Good. Secrets in the meat. The way we process it. Old ways. The ways people don't use no more. I bought more Boudin. I'm eating it now. It tastes even better than before, but I can't stop thinking about that exchange, about the woman's question, about Claude's smile that wasn't really a smile. I looked up disappearances along Highway 90 in Jefferson Davis Parish, found 3 in the last 15 years, all hikers or travelers passing through, all unsolved. I'm sure it's coincidence. Rural Louisiana has crime like anywhere else, but something about the way Claude said the way we process it is bothering me. Comments: 1,247. Likes: 4,002. Post: 50. I found something posted, May 15th, 2025, 3:24. I can't sleep. I drove back to Hebert's after midnight. The shop was closed, but there were lights on in the back, the processing room. I walked around the building and found a window. I looked inside. They were making Boudin, Claude, and 2 other men. Standard process at first, grinding meat, mixing with rice, adding seasonings. But then I saw what meat they were grinding. It wasn't pork. The shape was wrong. The color was wrong. And there were parts, pieces, that were unmistakably human. A hand with fingers, part of a rib cage, a section of leg with a tattoo still visible on the skin. They were feeding it through an industrial grinder, mixing it with pork and rice, stuffing it into casings. I must have made a sound because Claude looked up, looked directly at the window, directly at me. He smiled, that same smile that doesn't reach his eyes. He raised one gloved hand and waved. Then he pointed at the window, pointed at me, mouthed something that looked like, "You know now." I ran to my car, drove back to my hotel in Lake Charles, called the police. They said they'd send someone to investigate, but they sounded skeptical. Hebert's has been there forever, the dispatcher said. Respectable family business. I'm looking at the Boudin I bought yesterday, still wrapped in butcher paper on my hotel desk. 3 links. I've eaten probably 10 pounds of this over 3 days. 10 pounds of what? Of who? That metallic taste, that distinctive flavor I couldn't identify, that lingering aftertaste that made me keep coming back for more. Oh God. Comments. Disabled. Post under review. Post Dirter 51. Final update. Posted May 15th, 2025, 2:17 p.m. The police investigated. Found nothing unusual. Standard meat processing facility. Everything up to code. Pork from a distributor in Abbeville. Rice from Louisiana mills. All properly documented. All legal. They think I hallucinated. Heat exhaustion maybe. Too much travel. Too much rich food. The officer was kind but firm. Hebert's has been serving this community for over 100 years, ma'am. You can't go around making accusations like that. Claude was there during the inspection. He showed them everything, explained the whole process. The officer even ate some Boudin, said it was the best he'd ever had, asked for the recipe. Claude laughed and said, "Family secret. I'm leaving Louisiana today, cutting the Boudin trail short. But before I go, I did more research. The 3 disappearances I mentioned all happened within 5 miles of Hebert's, all in years when the shop won additional Best Boudin awards from local festivals. All people traveling alone, all people who would take weeks or months for anyone to report missing. And here's what really scares me. In 1923, when the shop opened, there was a 4th Hebert brother, named Albert. Parish records show 4 sons born to Jean-Pierre and Marie Hebert, but only 3 appear in any records after 1923. Claude, Maurice, and Thomas. Albert just vanished. Same year the shop opened. Same year they started making their famous Boudin. I found one newspaper clipping from 1924, small article. Local meat market wins blue ribbon at St. Landry Parish Fair. Quote from Jean-Pierre Hebert. Secrets in the meat. We use every part. Nothing wasted. Old country. Ways. Nothing wasted. I threw away the remaining links, but I can still taste it. That metallic undertone. That flavor that made me come back 3 days in a row. That distinctive quality that makes Hebert's Boudin the best in Louisiana. I know what I saw through that window. I know what they were grinding, but I can't prove it. The police think I'm crazy. Claude knows I know and doesn't care because who would believe me? I'm ending the Boudin trail here, leaving Louisiana, going home to California, becoming vegetarian. But sometimes late at night I think about how good that Boudin tasted, how I wanted more, how even now, knowing what I know, part of me understands why people drive from Arkansas, why the shop stays in business, why the recipe hasn't changed in 102 years, because it really is the best Boudin in Louisiana. You just don't want to know why. I've been a hospice nurse for 11 years, but I'd never worked overnight shifts alone until last month. The pay was better, and honestly, I needed it. Student loans from nursing school don't forgive themselves. When Hospice Care Louisiana offered me the position at Broussard House in Abbeville, I took it without hesitation. It's a beautiful 1840s Creole cottage in Vermilion Parish, converted into a hospice facility for end-of-life care. 6 private bedrooms, high ceilings, original cypress floors. The kind of place that should feel peaceful. My first patient was Mrs. Evangeline Como, 87 years old, stage 4 pancreatic cancer. She had maybe 2 weeks left, according to the doctors. Sweet lady. Her family visited during the day, and I took care of her from 11 at night until 7 in the morning, 5 nights a week. Just me and her in that big old house. I didn't mind the solitude. I'd worked in busy hospitals where you couldn't hear yourself think. The quiet was welcome. The first 3 nights were uneventful. Mrs. Como slept most of the time, her breathing steady with the help of oxygen. I'd check her vitals every 2 hours, adjust her medication, sit in the chair beside her bed, and read or do paperwork. The house settled and creaked the way old houses do, wood expanding and contracting with temperature changes. Nothing unusual, nothing that worried me. The 4th night, everything changed. It was October 10th, 2:34 in the morning, according to my watch. I was downstairs in the kitchen making coffee when I heard it. 3 knocks, distinct, deliberate, knock, 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 loud enough that I jumped and spilled hot water on my hand. I thought someone was at the front door, which was strange because we didn't get visitors at that hour. I walked to the entrance, turned on the porch light, looked through the window. Nobody there. I opened the door anyway, stepped out onto the porch. The street was empty. Abbeville at 2:30 in the morning is dead quiet. I checked all the windows on the first floor, thinking maybe a branch had hit the glass. But there was no wind that night. The air was still and humid the way Louisiana nights are. I went back to my coffee, told myself it was nothing. Old houses make noise. I'd heard that 1,000 times. But something about those 3 knocks bothered me. They were too precise, too intentional, too much like someone actually knocking. The next night, October 11th, it happened again, 3:13 in the morning. I know because I checked my watch the moment I heard it. 3 knocks, same pattern, same interval between each one, but this time they sounded closer. Not at the front door, somewhere inside the house, maybe the first floor hallway. I walked through every room, turning on lights, checking doors and windows. Everything was secure. Mrs. Como was sleeping peacefully upstairs. I stood in the hallway listening, but the knocking didn't repeat. Just those 3 raps, then silence. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Not dangerous necessarily, but wrong. Off. I sat in the living room for the rest of the shift, unable to concentrate on my book, unable to stop thinking about those knocks. When my relief nurse arrived at 7, I almost mentioned it to her but decided against it. She'd think I was paranoid, hearing things, letting the isolation get to me. The 3rd night of knocking was October 12th, 3:13 a.m. exactly. I was upstairs with Mrs. Como when it happened, sitting in the chair beside her bed, updating her medication log. 3 knocks, clear as day, coming from directly outside her bedroom door. So loud I jumped out of my chair. My heart was pounding as I crossed the room and opened the door. The hallway was empty. Dark. Nothing there. But Mrs. Comeau had woken up. She was looking toward the door with an expression I couldn't read. Not fear. Something else. Recognition, maybe. That's when I remembered my grandmother's stories. My mère was full of Cajun folklore, old traditions, superstitions passed down through generations. She used to tell me about the death knock, 3 raps that announce when someone is about to die. She said it was an old Creole tradition, that death itself comes knocking to give warning, to prepare the family, to let the dying person know their time is close. Her own grandmother had heard it the night before her husband passed away in 1952. 3 knocks on the bedroom door at 3 in the morning. He died the next afternoon. I'd always thought it was just a story, the kind of thing old Cajun women tell to explain coincidence, to make sense of death. But standing in that doorway, looking at Mrs. Comeau's knowing expression, I wasn't so sure anymore. I closed the door and went back to my chair. Neither of us spoke. She drifted back to sleep. I stayed awake the rest of the night, watching her breathe, checking her vitals more frequently than necessary, waiting for something I couldn't name. Mrs. Comeau died on October 13th at 4:47 in the morning. I was holding her hand. She'd been declining throughout the night, her breathing becoming more labored, her blood pressure dropping. At 3:13, those 3 knocks came again, on her bedroom door, loud, unmistakable. I heard them clearly. Mrs. Comeau heard them too. She opened her eyes and looked directly at the door. Then she smiled, actually smiled, and said something in Cajun French. Je vous entends. I hear you. 94 minutes later, she was gone. Peaceful, no struggle, just a final breath and then stillness. I sat with her for a while, holding her hand, processing what had just happened. The death knock was real. It had come for her 3 nights in a row, 3 warnings, 3 knocks each night, leading up to this moment. I called her family, did the necessary paperwork, met with the funeral home. My shift ended, and I went home and couldn't sleep. I kept hearing those knocks in my head, kept seeing Mrs. Comeau's smile when she heard them on that final night. She wasn't afraid. She'd recognized them, expected them, maybe even welcomed them. I took a week off after Mrs. Comeau passed, needed to clear my head. But I came back. Started another case at Broussard House, different patient, different room. Mr. Paul Landry, 72, congestive heart failure. I didn't expect to hear the knocking again. Thought maybe it was specific to Mrs. Comeau somehow, connected to her. I was wrong. 3 weeks into caring for Mr. Landry, the knock started. 3:13 in the morning, 3 raps. First night on the front door. Second night in the hallway. Third night on his bedroom door. He died 2 days later. Then there was Mrs. Josephine Bro. Same pattern. 3 nights of knocking. Death followed shortly after. Then Mr. Thomas Hebert. Then Mrs. Marie Arsenault. I've been at Broussard House for 6 months now. I've cared for 14 patients. 13 of them have died, and every single one was preceded by 3 nights of knocking. Always at 3:13 in the morning. Always 3 raps. Always moving closer to their room. Always ending at their door on the 3rd night. I've tried to tell people, my supervisor, other nurses, my family. They all say the same thing. Old house, settling wood, temperature changes, coincidence, imagination, stress. But I know what I hear. I know what those knocks mean. Death announcing itself, giving warning, following the old Cajun tradition that my grandmother told me about, but I never believed. The worst part isn't hearing the knocks. It's knowing what they mean. It's counting down. First night, death is coming. Second night, death is closer. Third night, death is at the door, and there's nothing I can do to stop it. I'm a nurse. I'm supposed to help people. But the death knock doesn't care about medicine or treatment or intervention. When it starts knocking, the outcome is inevitable. I have a new patient now, Mrs. Catherine Thibodeau, 89 years old, Alzheimer's, and multiple organ failure. She's been here for 5 days. Last night, October 17th, at 3:13 in the morning, I heard 3 knocks on the front door. I went to check. Nobody there. But I know what it means. Tonight will be the second night. The knocking will move inside. Tomorrow night it will be at her door. And within a day or two after that, Mrs. Thibodeau will be gone. I'm writing this during my shift. It's 2:45 in the morning, 28 minutes until the knocking starts. I'm sitting in the chair beside Mrs. Thibodeau's bed, watching her sleep, waiting. Some of my patients hear the knocks. Some don't. Some recognize them like Mrs. Comeau did. Some sleep through all 3 nights. But the knocking always comes. Death always announces itself. My grandmother was right. The death knock is real. In Vermilion Parish, in these old Creole cottages, death still follows the traditions. Still gives warning. Still knocks 3 times before taking someone home. And I hear it every time, every patient, every death. 3 nights of knocking, 3 raps each night. Always at 3:13 in the morning. Always getting closer. It's 3:10 now. 3 minutes until the knocking starts. I can feel it coming. The air in the room has changed, gotten heavier, colder. Mrs. Thibodeau's breathing has shifted slightly. And somewhere in the house, death is approaching, moving up the stairs, walking down the hallway, raising its hand to knock. I'm not afraid anymore. I've heard it too many times. But I still count the interval between each rap, still mark the time, still acknowledge what's coming. Because in Cajun tradition, you don't ignore the death knock. You listen. You respect it. You prepare. 3:13. Here it comes. Knock, knock, knock. I came to the lower 9th Ward to document recovery. It's been 20 years since Hurricane Katrina, and I wanted to capture how far the neighborhood has come, or hasn't come. That was supposed to be my angle. Before and after, resilience, the human spirit, all the things documentary filmmakers say when they're really just disaster tourists with cameras. I'm Alexis Monroe. I make independent documentaries about forgotten places and forgotten people. The lower 9th Ward checked both boxes. I arrived on October 1st, 2025, with my camera equipment, my research notes, and a rental car with GPS that kept trying to redirect me back to the French Quarter. The algorithm couldn't understand why anyone would want to go here. 20 years after the levees broke and the industrial canal sent water surging through these streets, the lower 9th still looks abandoned. Not all of it. There are some rebuilt homes. Brad Pitt's make-it-right houses, with their distinctive angular architecture, a few scattered residents who came back and refused to leave, but mostly it's empty lots overgrown with weeds, streets that end in nothing, houses that were never demolished, just left to rot. I set up my first shot on Claiborne Avenue near Tennessee Street. This was where the water reached 12 feet deep, where it stayed for weeks while the Corps of Engineers tried to pump the city dry. I wanted to capture the contrast between the few renovated houses and the crumbling structures beside them. I was adjusting my camera's aperture when I saw her, a woman standing in front of a house that was clearly uninhabitable. Roof collapsed, windows gone, spray paint marks from rescue teams still visible on the exterior. She was standing perfectly still in the overgrown front yard, just staring at the house, wearing a dress that looked wet even though it hadn't rained in days. I called out to her, asked if I could interview her. She didn't respond, didn't turn around, just kept staring. I walked closer, maybe 20 feet away, and that's when I noticed the water line on her dress, like she'd been standing waist deep in floodwater. The fabric was soaked, dripping, but when the drops hit the ground, they didn't make puddles. They just disappeared. I raised my camera to film her, and she vanished. Not walked away. Vanished. 1 second she was there, the next she wasn't. I checked my footage. She wasn't on it. The house was there, the overgrown yard, but no woman. I told myself it was the heat. October in Louisiana is still brutal, and I'd been carrying equipment in the sun. Dehydration, stress, first-day nerves, all the rational explanations. The next location was on North Rampart Street. I wanted to film the Industrial Canal breach site. This was where the wall failed catastrophically, sending a tsunami of water into the neighborhood with such force it ripped houses off their foundations. There's a memorial now, names of the dead. But standing there with my camera, I heard something that didn't match the quiet afternoon. Water, rushing water, loud, getting louder. I spun around and saw it. A wall of water, dark brown, full of debris, moving down the street toward me. I could see cars tumbling in it, trees, parts of houses, and people, bodies floating in the surge. I ran, grabbed my equipment, and sprinted back toward my car. But when I looked over my shoulder, the water was gone. The street was dry, empty, silent. My heart was pounding. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my camera. The lens cracked when it hit the pavement. I sat there in the middle of North Rampart Street trying to understand what I'd just seen. A hallucination, a panic attack, something my brain created from all the research I'd done, all the footage I'd watched of the flooding. But I could smell it. Sewage, chemicals, death, the smell of Katrina floodwater. It lingered in my nose, even though the street was dry and empty and normal. I went back to my hotel, tried to process what was happening, did more research, found articles about lower 9th Ward residents reporting strange experiences, seeing neighbors who had died in the flood, hearing screaming from empty houses, smelling water that wasn't there. Most people dismissed it as trauma, PTSD, grief, the psychological aftermath of catastrophic loss. But some of the accounts were specific, detailed, consistent. A woman named Evelyn Gasper had given an interview in 2015, 10 years after Katrina. She said she saw her mother standing in floodwater every August 29th at exactly the moment the levee broke. Same position, same expression of terror, same water line at her chest, year after year. A temporal echo. Her mother drowning over and over in water that no longer existed. I decided to go back, to film at the exact times these incidents were reported. If something was happening in the lower 9th Ward, if Katrina had somehow burned itself into the location so deeply that it was still replaying, I needed to document it. That was my job. That was the documentary. On October 15th, I returned to Claiborne Avenue at 6:10 a.m. That was the time the Industrial Canal levee failed on August 29, 2005. I set up my camera facing the direction the water had come from. I had backup batteries, multiple memory cards, a tripod for stability. I was ready. At 6:09, the air changed, got heavier, colder. The morning birds stopped singing. At 6:10 exactly, I heard it. The levee breaking. A sound like thunder mixed with tearing metal. Then the water came. Not real water. Temporal water. A recording of the flood playing back 20 years later. I could see it through my camera's viewfinder. A wall of destruction moving down the street. Cars floating past. A refrigerator. Someone's front porch. And bodies. So many bodies. People who didn't evacuate. People who thought they could ride it out. People who drowned in their attics waiting for rescue that came too late. I filmed everything. My hands were steady even though my mind was screaming. The water reached me, passed through me. I felt the cold, felt the pressure, felt debris hitting my legs even though nothing was physically touching me. I was experiencing the flood, not as memory, as presence, as if August 29, 2005 was still happening, had never stopped happening, was happening eternally in this place where so many people died. The water receded after approximately 4 minutes, left me standing in a dry street holding a camera that had just recorded something impossible. I checked the footage immediately. It was all there. The water, the debris, the bodies, temporal echoes caught on digital video, proof that Katrina hadn't just damaged the lower Ninth Ward physically. It had damaged it temporally, created a scar in time that kept replaying the worst day in this neighborhood's history. I spent the next 3 days filming at different locations. Same pattern every time. At the moment the water had reached each spot originally, it reached it again. A phantom flood. I documented it all. Houses being torn apart by surge, people trapped on roofs, a man clinging to a tree as the current tried to pull him under. All of it captured through my camera lens, all of it happening simultaneously with the present. 2 timelines occupying the same space, but the footage changed, started showing me things that weren't part of the original flood. People standing in the water, who were dressed in modern clothes, watching the flood happen around them. Standing in the same positions I'd seen the wet woman standing on my first day. They were experiencing the temporal echo just like I was, but they weren't trying to escape it. They were standing in it, letting it wash over them, letting themselves drown over and over. On October 19th, I went to the breach site again, same time, 6:10 a.m. The water came, but this time it didn't recede. It stayed, rose higher, reached my waist, my chest, my neck. And I realized the temporal echo was getting stronger, not fading with time, intensifying. The flood was reclaiming what it had taken, pulling this place back into August 29, 2005, making that day permanent. I tried to move, couldn't. The water held me, not with physical force, with temporal force, with the weight of history, with the gravity of 2,000 dead. I was drowning in a flood that happened 20 years ago, drowning in time itself. My camera was still recording, still capturing everything, still documenting my death in water that existed and didn't exist simultaneously. I saw them around me, the others, the people who had stood in the temporal flood and never left, the woman in the wet dress, the man on North Rampart, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all frozen in the moment of the flood, all trapped in August 29th, 2005, all drowning eternally. They looked at me with expressions I couldn't read. Not quite alive, not quite dead. Stuck in the space between. The water reached my mouth, my nose, my eyes. I stopped struggling, stopped fighting. The lower Ninth Ward wasn't recovering. It was remembering. And memory here was stronger than time, stronger than reality, strong enough to pull people back, strong enough to make the past present, strong enough to ensure that Hurricane Katrina never really ended. My camera is still recording, still running, still capturing footage no one will ever see because I'm still here, still in the water, still in August 29, 2005, still experiencing the flood. It's been 4 days in real time, 20 years in temporal time. The water has been rising for 2 decades and it will never stop rising. The lower Ninth Ward is drowning forever. And now, so am I. If you're reading this, if someone finds my footage, if my camera somehow makes it out of the temporal loop, don't come here, don't film here, don't try to document the recovery. There is no recovery. There's only repetition. The storm is still happening. The water is still rising, and the lower Ninth Ward is still drowning, one person at a time, pulling them back to the worst day, making them part of the flood that never recedes. The water line is at my eyes now. I can see through it. 2 timelines, 2025 and 2005, overlapping, merging, becoming one. Katrina is building strength, getting ready, preparing to surge again, not in memory, in reality. The temporal echoes are getting louder. The flood is getting deeper. And one day soon, the lower Ninth Ward won't be echoing the past. It will be the past, permanently, eternally. August 29th, 2005, forever. The water welcomes all. You shouldn't have bought that doll. I know you did because you're reading this. And only people who bought that specific doll from that specific shop on Royal Street ever find this letter. It comes in the box with the doll, tucked underneath the Spanish moss stuffing and the instruction card that tells you how to use it. Most people throw the letter away without reading it. You didn't. That means you're already connected to it. That means it's already working on you. Let me tell you what you actually bought. Not a souvenir, not a novelty item for your friends back home to laugh at. You bought something that's been waiting for you specifically. That doll you're holding, right now, the one you probably think is kind of cute in a creepy way, has your name attached to it. Not written down, not literally, but spiritually, energetically. The moment you walked into that shop on Royal Street and your eyes landed on that particular doll among the dozens of identical ones, a connection was made, a binding. I know because I used to own the shop, used to make those dolls myself. 13 years I ran that business, and every single person who bought one of my special dolls ended up exactly where you are now, reading this letter, trying to decide if I'm serious, trying to rationalize what you've already started experiencing, the dreams, maybe, or the feeling that someone's watching you, or the small accidents that keep happening, the dropped glass, the missed step on the stairs, the car that almost hit you, little things. For now, you need to understand Louisiana voodoo before this goes further, before you dismiss this as nonsense and throw the doll away, which would be the worst thing you could do. Real voodoo isn't what you see in movies. It's not about revenge or hurting people. Marie Laveau, the most famous voodoo queen of New Orleans, she used her power to help people, to heal, to protect. But, like anything powerful, voodoo can be twisted, can be corrupted, can be used by people who understand the mechanisms but not the morality. People like the woman I bought the shop from in 2012. People like me after I learned what the dolls really did. The shop was called Erzuli's, maybe still is. I haven't been back to that part of Royal Street in 8 years, too afraid of what I'd see, or who I'd see. The previous owner was a woman named Delphine Arsenault, 73 years old, fifth-generation voodoo practitioner. She told me the shop had been in her family since 1897, told me she was the last one left and needed someone to take over, someone who respected the tradition. I was 26, broke, desperate for a business opportunity. She sold it to me for $1 and a promise. The promise was that I'd never ask questions about the dolls. I kept that promise for 6 months. The shop did well. Tourists loved the atmosphere, the handmade items, the tarot readings I offered in the back room, but the dolls bothered me. They were kept on a special shelf behind the counter, never more than 13 at a time. When someone bought one, Delphine would show up the next day with a replacement. She never explained how she knew, never explained how she kept making them even though she'd sold me the shop, never explained why certain customers would walk in and go straight to those dolls like they were being pulled. I broke my promise in month 7. Asked Delphine what made those dolls special. She looked at me with eyes that had seen too much and said, "They fix imbalances." I asked what that meant. She said, "People who buy those dolls need correction. Life's gotten too easy for them, too comfortable. They've forgotten what it means to struggle, what it means to fear, what it means to respect forces bigger than themselves. The dolls restore balance. The dolls teach lessons. I should have walked away then, should have given her back the shop and left New Orleans entirely. But I was young and stupid and fascinated. I asked her to teach me. She did. Over the next 6 years, Delphine taught me how to make the dolls, how to prepare them, how to bind them to specific types of people. The process isn't what you'd expect. It's not about sticking pins in cloth. It's about intention, about focus, about understanding that everything is connected and connections can be manipulated. Each doll is made from materials gathered at 13 different Louisiana locations. The Spanish moss comes from a specific tree in St. Martinville, where 3 people hanged themselves in 1889. The cloth is cut from burial shrouds stolen from unmarked graves in Potter's Fields. The thread is made from hair collected at Angola prison from death row inmates. The stuffing includes dirt from Marie Laveau's supposed tomb, though that might be theater. The real power comes from the binding ritual. 3 nights of chanting, 3 offerings at Congo Square, 3 drops of the maker's blood mixed into the doll's core. By the time the doll reaches the shop, it's active, waiting, searching for its match. That's why you felt drawn to it. Your energy signature matched the frequency Delphine and I embedded in the doll when we made it. The doll recognized you the moment you walked in. Recognized that you needed correction. Recognized that your life had gotten too easy and you'd forgotten how to be afraid. What correction means varies. For some people, it's small. Lost jobs, failed relationships, health scares that resolve but leave lasting anxiety. For others, it's catastrophic. I've tracked 13 people over the years, followed their stories after they bought the dolls. 4 committed suicide. 3 developed terminal illnesses within months. 2 disappeared completely, no trace ever found. The rest are still alive but transformed, broken, traumatized, balanced. I stopped making the dolls in 2020, tried to close the shop, but Delphine appeared at my door and told me I couldn't break the chain, that the dolls needed to continue, that I'd made a promise, and promises in voodoo aren't symbolic. They're binding, literally binding. She showed me what would happen if I stopped. Showed me the previous owners, 7 generations of Arsenault family members who'd tried to end it, all dead. All killed by the accumulated energy of every correction that hadn't been completed, the imbalance seeking balance. So I made a choice. I created one final batch of 13 dolls, put more of myself into them than I'd ever done before. More blood, more intention, more focus. Then I packaged each one with this letter and sold the shop to someone new. Someone who won't ask questions for at least 6 months. Someone who will continue the tradition until they can't anymore. The cycle continues. It always continues. You're holding the last doll I ever made. The 13th. The most powerful. The one that contains not just my blood, but pieces of my name, my history, my own need for correction. Because I needed balance too. Needed to pay for what I'd done. Needed to face consequences for 13 years of binding people to suffering. The correction is already starting for you. You've felt it. The dreams are getting worse. The accidents are getting closer. Your luck is changing. Your comfort is evaporating. Your easy life is ending. The doll is working exactly as designed, teaching you fear, teaching you respect, teaching you that there are forces in this world that don't care about your plans or your comfort or your life. You have 3 choices. First, you can keep the doll. Accept the correction, survive it if you're strong enough. Some people do survive. They come out harder, wiser, humbled. They understand what it means to live at the mercy of powers beyond their control. They become better people, or they become broken people. Either way, they're balanced. Second, you can destroy the doll, burn it, bury it, throw it in the Mississippi River. But destruction doesn't end the binding. It amplifies it. Every person who's tried to destroy their doll has experienced accelerated correction, immediate consequences, devastating losses. The energy has to go somewhere, and when you destroy the vessel, it goes directly into your life, unfiltered, uncontrolled, absolute. Third, you can pass it on, give the doll to someone else, sell it, gift it, abandon it somewhere public where someone will find it and take it home. The binding will transfer. The correction will shift to them. You'll be free for a while, until the accumulated debt catches up, until every imbalance you've caused by passing your correction to someone innocent comes due. That debt is worse than the original correction. Ask me how I know. I'm writing this on October 17th, 2025. By the time you read it, I'll probably be dead. The 13th doll was made with a specific binding. It's connected to me. Whatever correction it brings to you, I'll experience too. Simultaneously. Your suffering is my suffering. Your fear is my fear. Your balance is my balance. That's my correction. That's my payment for 13 years of inflicting this on others. So here's what happens next. You finish reading this letter. You look at the doll you bought. You feel the weight of it, the wrongness of it, the power emanating from it. You try to decide which of the three choices to make. But while you're deciding, the correction continues. While you're reading this sentence, something in your life is changing. Someone you love is making a decision that will hurt you. Some opportunity is closing. Some danger is approaching. The doll is working. The balance is shifting. And me? I'm sitting in a hotel room in Lafayette, Louisiana, feeling every bit of it. Every fear you feel. Every accident you experience. Every loss you suffer. Because we're bound now. You and me, connected through Spanish moss and burial shrouds and death row hair and blood, connected through 13 generations of voodoo tradition, corrupted into something that devours instead of heals. The worst part is, I can't tell you which choice to make. Can't guide you toward the least painful option, because every path leads to suffering. That's what correction means. That's what balance demands. Your comfort was built on someone else's discomfort. Your ease was purchased with someone else's difficulty. Your privilege required someone else's oppression. The doll just makes that visible, makes that tangible, makes you pay the debt you didn't know you owed. I'm sorry, not for binding you, but for not being strong enough to break the chain myself, for passing my curse to you instead of carrying it alone, for making 13 dolls instead of 0, for being exactly what Delphine said I'd be, another link in a chain that stretches back to 1897 and forward to whenever someone finally finds a way to end it. The doll is watching you right now. Its button eyes don't move, but somehow they're tracking you. Its stitched mouth doesn't open, but somehow it's speaking, telling you things you don't want to hear, showing you things you don't want to see. The correction has begun, the balance is shifting, and there's nothing either of us can do to stop it. Welcome to the tradition. Welcome to the binding. Welcome to Louisiana voodoo as it really exists beneath the tourist shops and the souvenir stands and the respectable history. Welcome to the darkness. I'll see you soon. In dreams, in accidents, in corrections, we're connected now. Forever. 13 stories from 13 dark corners of Louisiana. Each one a warning. Each one a truth. Each one a reminder that some places hold power older than understanding and darker than night. If these stories have disturbed you, if they've made you question what you thought you knew about Louisiana, then they've done their job. Subscribe to Verified Souls for more horror from the places where the veil is thin and the past refuses to stay buried. Because in Louisiana, every legend has roots, every story has teeth, and every warning comes too late.